Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in high school DxD and got married to Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Unmeasured Variable. The bell's chime was a flat, tinny sound that sliced through the lazy afternoon haze hanging over Kuo Academy. It was the sound of release, and a tidal wave of chatter and scraping chairs followed in its wake. From her position in the old school building, Rias could feel the shift in the campus's ambient energy as hundreds of students flooded out of the main building. Their minds on anything but academics. It was a familiar, comforting rhythm. Mundane. She stood by the tall arched window of the Occult Research Club room, the setting sun casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor and glinting off the crimson of her hair. Beside her, Akeno Himahima, her queen and closest friend, hummed a soft tune as she prepared a pot of tea, the clink of course laying a delicate counterpoint to the distant din. "He's staying late again," Akeno said, her voice a silken melody. She didn't need to look. They both knew who she meant. Rias's gaze drifted down to the athletic field. Most of it was empty, save for a few stragglers from the track team packing up their gear. But there, in the center of the vast green space, was a lone figure. Naruto Uzumaki. He was methodically gathering stray soccer balls and jogging equipment left behind by the PE classes, his movements economical and unhurried. He wore the standard school gym uniform, but on his frame, it looked less like a uniform and more like the comfortable attire of a dedicated practitioner. "He always does," Rias replied, a thoughtful frown touching her lips. "It's like he feels a personal responsibility for the state of the campus. Or he just enjoys the quiet," Akeno mused, bringing 2 steaming cups of tea over on a tray. "He doesn't seem to mind being alone." That was an understatement. Naruto Uzumaki was an island of tranquility in the turbulent sea of high school social dynamics. He wasn't an outcast, far from it. He was universally liked. He was pleasant to his classmates, helpful to his teachers, and possessed a bright, easy smile that could disarm even the most cynical faculty member. Yet, no one truly knew him. He had no close circle of friends, joined no clubs, and deflected any and all personal questions with a practiced, good-natured charm that left the asker feeling satisfied without having learned a single thing. To the student body, he was just a nice, somewhat solitary guy with a shock of spiky blonde hair and an almost preternatural talent for athletics. To Rias and her peerage, he was an enigma wrapped in a puzzle box, sitting in the middle of their territory. "Any changes in his readings today?" Rias asked, taking a cup from the tray. The black tea was fragrant, a familiar comfort. Akeno's smile tightened just a fraction, the only sign of her own deep-seated curiosity. "None. It's the same as always. A void. A void." That was the only word for it. Every living creature in the world gave off some form of energy signature. Humans had a faint, flickering aura. Those with sacred gears had a brighter, more distinct flare. Devils, angels, and fallen angels pulsed with their own unique energies, demonic, holy, or a mix of the two. Rias could read these signatures as easily as she could read a book. She could feel the faint spark of Issei Hyodo's dormant sacred gear 2 classrooms away, the quiet hum of Kiba's swordsmanship, the raw physica. Power contained in Kaniko's small frame. But when she focused on Naruto Uzumaki, there was nothing. It wasn't that he had no energy. It was that her senses, honed by generations of Grimoire blood, simply stopped. It was like looking at a star and seeing only a perfect, round hole in the fabric of the cosmos. There was a presence there, an undeniable weight, but it was made of a substance her devil senses could not perceive or classify. It was unnerving. "Kaniko-chan still says he smells like sunshine and ramen," Akeno added, her violet eyes twinkling with amusement. Rias allowed a small smile. "Kaniko's senses are more refined than ours in some ways. But sunshine isn't a measurable form of energy, Akeno." "Perhaps we should start a new classification," Akeno teased gently. "The sunshine class. I wonder what his evil peace value would be." The joke hung in the air, but it was underpinned by a serious question. From a strategic standpoint, Naruto Uzumaki was a terrifyingly unknown variable. His physical abilities were staggering. During PE, he'd been pitted against Kiba in a kendo match. Kiba, for all his effortless grace and demonic enhancement, had been forced to a standstill. Naruto moved with an instinctive, almost feral fluidity, his reflexes seeming to border on precognition. He hadn't won, but he hadn't lost either. He'd simply met Kiba's speed, a feat that should have been impossible for a normal human. Then there was the incident in the weight room, where he'd casually re-racked a barbell loaded with a weight that would have made a seasoned powerlifter, or low-class devil, sweat. He had done it with one hand, as if it were a toy. If he were human, I'd have offered him a place months ago, Rias admitted, her gaze still fixed on the blonde moving below. But to try and reincarnate, it feels like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup. We don't know what would happen. We don't know what he is. And that, Akeno said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone, is what makes him so fascinating. And potentially, so dangerous. Down on the field, Naruto finished his self-appointed cleanup. He slung a heavy bag of balls over his shoulder with no ble effort and began the jog back toward the main school building. As he moved, his head suddenly snapped to the side, his gaze fixed on a spot far beyond the school gates. He stood frozen for a full 3 seconds. A stillness so absolute it was unnerving. Then, just as quickly, he relaxed, shook his head as if clearing it, and continued on his way. Rias felt a prickle of unease. "Did you see that?" "I did," Akeno confirmed. Her teacup paused halfway to her lips. He looked like a predator that just caught a scent on the wind. Rias's finely honed instincts screamed that something was wrong. That brief, sharp focus from Naruto was not random. She turned from the window, her expression hardening. "Get Kiba and Kaneko. I want a report on all non-peerage supernatural activity in town." Now, Akeno's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by the cool efficiency of a queen executing her king's command. She placed her cup down with a firm click. Right away, Bushu. The quiet peace of the afternoon had just been shattered. Rias didn't know how or why, but she knew with absolute certainty that the center of the disturbance was connected to the same thing that had just caught Naruto Uzumaki's attention. The park was quiet as dusk began to bleed purple and orange across the sky. The fountain at its center burbled peacefully, the last of the evening birds sang their final songs, and the air was cooling. For Issei Hyodo, it was supposed to be the perfect end to a perfect first date. Yuma Amano was, in a word, perfect. She was beautiful, she had laughed at his jokes, and she hadn't NCE recoiled at his barely concealed perverted comments. It was a dream come true. "Issei-kun," she said, her voice soft and sweet as she stopped before the fountain. "Today was so much fun. Thank you for showing me around." "No problem, Yuma-chan," Issei stammered, his heart hammering in his chest like a drum solo. This was it, the moment of truth. Was he going to get a kiss? Maybe more. His mind, a cesspool of heroic fantasies and lewd daydreams, was running wild. "There's just one thing I need to ask you before we part," she said, turning to face him. The setting sun haloed her dark hair, but her eyes were cast in shadow. "Anything," he blurted out, a little too eagerly. Her smile was dazzling, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Will you die for me?" Issei's brain short-circuited. It was a joke, right? A weird, dark joke. He opened his mouth to laugh it off, but the sound died in his throat. The world seemed to warp around Yuma. Her school uniform tore away, not like fabric, but like shedding skin. Replaced by a ludicrously skimpy outfit of black leather straps and cloth that left almost nothing to the imagination. But Issei's perverted thoughts were violently shoved aside by the sight of two massive, black feathered wings erupting from her back. They were wings of midnight, sleek and dangerous. Her face, once so sweet, was now twisted into a sneer of contempt and cruelty. The woman, the creature, before him was not Yuma Amano. What are you?" Issei whispered, stumbling backward, his legs turning to jelly. "A fallen angel," she hissed, her voice now a venomous rasp. "Sent here to deal with a potential nuisance. I must say, I'm disappointed. I thought the wielder of a sacred gear would have a bit more grit. But you're just a pathetic, perverted little boy." She raised a hand, and a spear of pure Blinding light materialized in her grasp. Don't worry, it will be quick. A shame, really. I was hoping to have a little more fun. Issei was paralyzed. His mind was screaming at him to run, to fight, to do something, but his body wouldn't obey. This couldn't be real. Angels, devils, sacred gears, it was all just stuff from video games and manga. He was just a normal, horny high school kid. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the searing pain he knew was coming. A soft thud, like a foot landing on grass, sounded nearby. You know, a calm, familiar voice said, I think you've had enough fun for one day. Issei's eyes snapped open. Standing between him and the winged monster, not 10 feet away, was Naruto Uzumaki. He was still in his gym clothes, his hands shoved casually in his pockets. He didn't look scared or shocked. He looked annoyed, like he'd just stumbled upon someone littering in his favorite park. The fallen angel, whose name was actually Rainer, stared at the newcomer with a mixture of confusion and fury. Who the hell are you? A stray exorcist. Get out of my way, human, or I'll kill you too. Naruto ignored her, his blue eyes glancing back at Issei, who was still trembling on the ground. You okay, Hyodo? She didn't hurt you. You Uzumaki-senpai, Issei croaked, his brain struggling to process the sheer insanity of the situation. What are you doing here? Run, she's a monster. Naruto offered a small, reassuring smile. It's fine, I've dealt with monsters before. He turned his attention back to Rainer, his expression hardening. The easygoing aura he normally carried had evaporated, replaced by something cold and incredibly dangerous. I don't know what a fallen angel is, and I don't much care. But you're leaking some seriously nasty vibes. It's upsetting the balance around here. So, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Or I'll make you. Rainer let out a shrieking laugh. You, a mere human, ordering me around. Don't make me laugh. She hefted her spear of light. You must have a death wish. Fine, I'll grant it. She lunged, not with human speed, but with a supernatural burst of motion, closing the distance between them in an instant. The light spear was aimed directly at Naruto's heart. Issei screamed, but the spear never landed. Naruto hadn't seemed to move, yet he was no longer where he had been. He was now standing a few feet to the left, his hands still in his pockets, an almost bored expression on his face. Rainer's spear had plunged into empty air. She whirled around, her eyes wide with shock. How did you? Too slow, Naruto stated, his voice flat. Enraged, Rainer unleashed a volley of smaller light spears, a dozen of them screaming through the air toward him. It was an attack that no human could possibly dodge. Naruto didn't dodge, he simply blurred. For a split second, his form seemed to flicker, and the deadly projectiles passed straight through the space he had occupied, peppering the ground and a park bench behind him, which sizzled and smoked on impact. He reappeared, his posture unchanged. Is that all you've got? He asked, a genuine question. From a rooftop several hundred yards away, Rias Grimori and her peerage watched, utterly dumbfounded. They had arrived just as Naruto had stepped in, a barrier of concealment magic hiding their presence. Rias had been ready to teleport in and save Issei, to offer him reincarnation and claim his sacred gear for her own. But now, she could only watch. Bushu, Kiba Yudo whispered, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that had yet to be summoned. His movements, they're not demonic speed. There's no trace of magic. It's purely physical, but it's impossible. Kaneko Tuju, perched on the edge of the roof, simply stared, her golden eyes wide. He smells angry, she said softly. Like a storm right before it breaks. Rainer was beyond furious now. Her pride as a fallen angel was being shredded by a human who shouldn't have been able to even follow her movements. You bastard, who are you? She shrieked, creating another, larger spear of light. Naruto finally took his hands out of his pockets. He cracked his neck, the sound sharp in the sudden silence. Me, I'm just a guy who doesn't like bullies. He raised his right hand, crossing the middle and index fingers of both hands in a simple, unfamiliar gesture. Shadow Clone Jutsu. There was a series of loud puffs, like miniature explosions of smoke, and suddenly Naruto was no longer alone. 10 identical copies of him stood in a loose circle around the stunned fallen angel. They all had the same look of calm determination on their faces. Issei's jaw was on the floor. Rias's breath hitched in her throat. What is this? Illusion magic, Rainer snarled, but her voice held a tremor of fear. She could feel them. Each one had a presence, a weight. Not exactly, the Naruto standing in front of her said, while another one to her left chimed in. Think of it more as a numbers game. The clone continued, grinning. And you, a third one behind her finished, are about to lose. Before Rainer could react, they attacked. It wasn't a chaotic brawl. It was a perfectly coordinated assault. Two clones rushed her from the front, forcing her to block with her light spear. A third slid in low, aiming a sweep kick at her legs, while a fourth dropped from above with an axe kick. She took to the air with a powerful beat of her wings, narrowly avoiding the ground assault. Coward, you can't reach me up here, she taunted. One of the clones on the ground smirked. You sure about that? He crouched, and another clone jumped onto his linked hands, being launched into the air like a projectile. A third clone, already in motion, leapt onto the back of the airborne one, using him as a springboard to gain even more height. The chain reaction continued, a living ladder of bodies propelling the final Naruto clone directly toward the airborne Rainer. It was a display of teamwork so seamless, so utterly impossible, that it broke every known law of combat and physics the devils were familiar with. What is that? Akeno murmured from the rooftop. Her usual playful tone completely gone, replaced by sheer, unadulterated awe. The final Naruto clone reached Rainer's altitude. As he flew towards her, his right hand began to glow. A swirling, aotic sphere of brilliant blue energy began to form in his palm. It spun with a high-pitched, warbling shriek, like a miniature hurricane being condensed into a single point. It gave off no holy or demonic energy, yet the raw, untamed power radiating from it was terrifying. It felt primal. It felt like creation and destruction mashed into one. Rainer's eyes went wide with primal terror. She tried to bring her spear up to defend. But she was too slow. Rasengan. The clone yelled, and slammed the swirling sphere into her stomach. The impact wasn't an explosion. It was a grinding, tearing vortex of force. Rainer didn't even have time to scream. The Rasengan drilled into her, shredding her leather costume, her skin, and her very being. She was blasted backward, not in a straight line, but tumbling end over end like a ragdoll caught in a typhoon, before crashing into the fountain with enough force to shatter the stone structure. The water geyser sputtered and died. The Naruto clone that had delivered the attack landed gracefully on the ground and, along with the other 9, dispersed into puffs of smoke. The original Naruto stood where he had been all along, his hand now empty. He looked at the wreckage of the fountain, where the grievously wounded fallen angel lay groaning, her wings bent at unnatural angles and her body flickering as her physical form struggled to hold itself together. Naruto started walking towards her. Wait, Rias Grimori's voice, commanding and sharp, cut through the air. In a swirl of crimson light, she and her peerage teleported from the rooftop to the park grounds. Appearing between Naruto and the fallen Rainer, Kiba stood with his hand on his sword, Kaniko's fists were clenched, and Akeno had a small, crackling ball of lightning dancing on her fingertips. They formed a defensive line, their eyes not on the defeated enemy, but on the blonde teenager who had just single-handedly accomplished what would have been a difficult fight for their entire team. Naruto stopped, his blue eyes taking in the newcomers. He recognized them from school. Rias Grimori, the untouchable campus idol. Akeno Himehime, her equally popular and beautiful second-in-command. Kiba Yuto, the school's prince, and Kaniko Tuju, the quiet mascot. He'd sensed them on the rooftop. Their energy was strange, dark, powerful, but not malicious like the winged woman's. Grimori Senpai, he said, his tone polite but wary. What are you doing here? Rias maintained her regal composure, though it took a considerable effort. Her mind was still reeling from the display she'd just witnessed. Shadow clones that were solid. An attack that felt like it could grind mountains to dust. This was beyond any magic she had ever encountered. I could ask you the same thing, Uzumaki-kun, she said, her voice steady. This is a devil matter. You are a human. You should not be involved. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Devil, is that what she is? I thought she called herself a fallen angel. He gestured to the groaning Rainer. Whatever she is, she was trying to kill Hyodo. I don't need a reason to get involved when that happens. His statement was so simple, so direct, it was disarming. It wasn't a boast or a justification. It was a fundamental truth of his character, laid bare. Era, Akeno purred, stepping forward slightly, her eyes alight with a dangerous curiosity. You're quite the hero, Uzumaki-kun. But that power you just used, it wasn't human. What was it? Naruto's gaze flickered to her, then back to Rias. It's mine, he said simply. He wasn't being evasive, it was the only answer he had. The techniques were instinct, the energy, a part of his very soul. He had dreams, fragmented and chaotic, of a past life, of giant frogs, of epic battles, of a nine-tailed fox. And a world drenched in this power he called chakra. But they were just dreams. In this life, it was just him. Before Rias could press him further, a pained whisper came from the wreckage of the fountain. Rainer was trying to pull herself up, her form flickering violently. You will all pay for this, she rasped, her eyes filled with hate. The factions squabble over their meaning. NG-less territories. Blind fools, you have no idea what's coming. The silence will claim you all. You are unworthy of its peace. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Silence. The word struck a strange, dissonant chord within him. An echo of a warning from a dream he couldn't quite recall. Suddenly, a strange, spiral-shaped brand on Rainer's shoulder began to glow with a sickly gray light. It wasn't a tattoo. It looked like it had been burned into her very essence. As it glowed, her body began to dissolve at an accelerated rate, not into particles of light or darkness, but into nothing. It was like she was being unwritten from reality. The master grants me release, she gurgled, a look of blissful horror on her face. In seconds, she was gone. The brand was the last thing to fade, leaving behind only broken stone and still water. Not even dust remained. A heavy silence descended upon the park, broken only by Issei's ragged breathing. What was that? Kiba asked, his usual calm shaken. I've never seen a stray dissolve like that. And that mark. Rias stared at the spot where Rainer had been, her mind racing. This was a complication, a major one, but the more pressing issue was standing right in front of her. Naruto Uzumaki, a being of immeasurable, unclassifiable power, operating completely outside their world's established rules. He was a strategic asset beyond reckoning, and a threat of equal magnitude. She took a deep breath. Her decision made. Uzumaki-kun, you have seen something you should not have. You possess a power we do not understand. On behalf of the House of Grimoire, I invite you to join me. I will give you a new life, a place in my family. I will make you one of my servants. She held out a hand, a crimson chess piece, a king, prophetically, materializing in her palm. It was the highest offer she could make. Naruto looked at the chess piece, then back at her face. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the strategic mind working behind the beautiful facade. He also saw a hint of genuine awe, and a sliver of fear. He shook his head. No, thanks, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I'm not looking to be anyone's servant. The rejection was blunt, absolute. Rias's composure finally cracked, a flicker of disbelief crossing her features. No one had ever turned down her offer. The power, the prestige, the extended life, it was a gift beyond measure. I don't think you understand, she began. But he cut her off. I understand perfectly, he said, his gaze softening slightly. You're offering me a place in your world, to put a leash on the power you don't understand. I get it, but my life is my own. I don't belong to you, or anyone else. He glanced over at Issei, who was now being helped to his feet by Kiba. Just make sure he gets home safe. His gaze swept over them one last time. Rias's shock, Akeno's intrigued smile, Kiba's wariness, Kaniko's wide-eyed stare. He gave a small nod, a silent acknowledgement, and then turned and began to walk away. Wait, Rias called out. We're not finished here. You can't just walk away. Naruto didn't stop. He just raised a hand in a lazy wave without looking back. Sure I can, he called over his shoulder. Watch me. And just like that, he was gone, disappearing into the deepening twilight, leaving the Grimoire peerage standing in the ruins of a fountain with 1,000 new questions and a profound sense of having just witnessed the arrival of a hurricane. The occult research club room was thick with tension. Issei Hyodo sat on one of the plush couches, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, still looking pale and shaken. Kiba had already used a memory alteration spell to fog the more traumatic details, leaving him with the impression of a dangerous gas leak and a vivid hallucination. It was a temporary fix. Rias knew she would need to address his sacred gear soon, but that problem had been violently knocked down the priority list. So, Kiba said, pacing back and forth. Let's review. A human, with no discernible magical energy, created solid, combat-capable clones out of thin air, utilized a level of taijutsu that rivals my own speed, and wielded an attack that disintegrated a fallen angel's body on contact. Did I miss anything? The attack wasn't a simple disintegration, Akeno corrected, her expression uncharacteristically serious as she stood by the window, looking out into the night. It was a grinding force. It didn't just destroy, it obliterated. There was no residual energy. No light, no demonic power. Just absence. Kaneko, curled up in her usual armchair, spoke without looking up from her lap. He smelled like the sun when he was fighting. And the wind, and the earth, all at once. Rias sat behind her desk, her chin resting on her steepled fingers. Her mind, usually a clear and orderly strategic map, was a chaotic mess. All her knowledge, all her training in demonic lore and magical theory, had no framework for what she had seen. Naruto Uzumaki fit nowhere. He is the ultimate variable, she said aloud, the words tasting like metal in her mouth. He is not a devil, angel, fallen, or yokai. His power is not holy, demonic, or based on any known magical system. He is an anomaly that could shatter the balance of power between the three factions. And he turned you down, Akeno added softly, turning from the window. There was no mockery in her voice, only a statement of fact. He wants no part of our world. He wants to be left alone. He can't be, Rias stated, her voice regaining its firmness. Not anymore. He's been exposed. That fallen angel, Rainer, worked for Kokobile. If she reported back about a human with such power, it's only a matter of time before Azazel and the Grigori take an interest. Or worse, the angels in heaven. That is neither holy nor demonic could be seen as a threat to both. She stood up, her crimson hair seeming to burn in the dim light of the club room. Her fear and confusion were coalescing back to their natural state, ambition and determination. He refused to be my servant, Rias declared, a dangerous glint in her blue-green eyes. He refused to be a pawn in my peerage. She walked over to the window, looking down at the now empty campus where Naruto had stood just hours before. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. Fine. If he won't be a pawn, then I'll just have to find a way to make him my king. Akeno watched her, a similar smile gracing her own lips. The void of power that was Naruto Uzumaki was terrifying, yes. But it was also the most exciting thing to happen in their world in a very, very long time. And she, for one, couldn't wait to see just how deep that void went. The boy who smelled like sunshine had a storm inside him, and she wanted to be there when it finally broke. For the first time in a long while, the future was not a carefully mapped-out political game. It was a thrilling, terrifying unknown. And its name was Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Kings and Pawns. The air in the occult research club room, usually a comfortable sanctuary of old wood and brewing tea, was now thick with an oppressive, unwelcome energy. It smelled of burnt sugar and arrogance. Rias Gramori stood rigid by her desk, her hands clenched into fists so tight her knuckles were white. Her entire peerage was present, standing in a loose, protective formation around her. Their expressions ranging from Kiba's polite hostility to Kaneko's flat, undisguised dislike. The source of their collective tension sat sprawled on the plush velvet couch as if it were his personal throne. Riser Phoenix. He was handsome in a way that was almost offensive, perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a smug, chiseled jaw, and clothes that probably cost more than the entire school's monthly budget. He was surrounded by several members of his own peerage, women in matching French-made outfits who gazed at him with unnerving, programmed adoration. My dearest Rias, Riser purred, his voice oozing a condescending charm that set Rias's teeth on edge. He gestured expansively at the room. Still playing with your little club. It's quaint. But the time for games is over. Our wedding is in a month. You should be in the underworld, preparing. A queen of the house of Phoenix has duties. I am the heiress of the house of Grimoire, Rias retorted, her voice dangerously cold. My duties are here, managing my territory. And I will remind you, Riser, that I have not yet agreed to this union. Riser laughed, a short, barking sound devoid of any real humor. Agreed. Oh, my sweet, naive Rias. Your agreement is a formality. A cute little tantrum your brother is allowing you to have. The contracts are signed. Our houses are uniting. It is for the good of the devil race, to preserve the purity of our noble bloodlines. You should be honored to be joined with the immortal Phoenix. He leaned forward, his crimson eyes locking onto hers. Or perhaps you're stalling for another reason. Lord Grimoire told me of the situation. This rating game you've been granted. He smirked. A final, desperate gamble. It's adorable. Do you truly believe this motley collection of strays can defeat my peerage? My 15 pieces, all loyal, all powerful, led by me, the immortal Riser Phoenix. His gaze swept dismissively over her family. Kiba's hand twitched towards an invisible hilt. Akeno's smile was a razor's edge. Kaneko just stared, projecting an aura of immense displeasure. They are my family, Rias said through gritted teeth. And they are more powerful than you can imagine. Are they? Riser stood up, sauntering around the room, inspecting her peerage like a farmer inspecting livestock. He paused in front of Akeno. The priestess of thunder. A half-breed fallen, I hear. How scandalous. The daughter of Barakil. Does your father know his precious little girl is serving a devil? Akeno's smile didn't falter, but a flicker of lightning danced in the depths of her violet eyes. My business is my own, Phoenix-sama. I would advise you to mind yours. Riser chuckled and moved on, his gaze landing on Issei, who was trying his best to look invisible. And what is this? The new addition. He smells of weakness and desperation. A human pervert with a mid-tier sacred gear. This is what you've staked your future on, Rias. Pathetic. Issei flushed with a mixture of shame and anger but said nothing. He knew he was out of his depth. Rias was about to unleash a torrent of fury, to blast the arrogant devil out of her clubhouse with a wave of destructive energy, when the door creaked open. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the doorway, a stack of books in his arms. He blinked, taking in the scene. The room was practically vibrating with hostility. He saw Rias, looking murderous, and her friends, all looking ready for a fight. And then he saw the flamboyant blonde guy who was clearly the source of the problem. Naruto's senses, which had been on high alert since the incident in the park, flared. This new guy reeked of power, yes. But it was a greasy, prideful energy, laced with contempt. It was an ugly feeling. Sorry, Naruto said, holding up the books. I was just returning these to the library and saw the lights on. Am I interrupting something? Riser's head snapped towards the newcomer. He looked Naruto up and down, a sneer forming on his face. A human. A simple, powerless human in a school uniform. And what is this? Another one of your pets, Rias. Rias's eyes widened slightly. Uzumaki-kun, you should go. This is a private club meeting. She was trying to warn him, to get him away from Riser's toxic presence. But it was too late. Riser's interest was piqued. He had heard whispers from his sister, Revel, about Rias taking an unusual interest in a particular human student. This must be him. Ah, so this is the one, Riser said, circling Naruto slowly. The human you've been watching. Riser is disappointed. He's nothing special, just another piece of cannon fodder in this pathetic little world. Naruto didn't react to the insults. He just watched Riser with a calm, neutral expression, his blue eyes giving nothing away. This seemed to infuriate Riser more than any retort would have. What's the matter, human? Cat got your tongue, Riser taunted, stopping directly in front of him. Or are you just so terrified in the presence of your superiors that you can't speak? Go on, scurry away before you get hurt. Naruto sighed, a soft sound of genuine weariness. It was like he was dealing with a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. Look, man, I don't know who you are. But you're making everyone in this room uncomfortable. You're a pretty bad guest. Maybe you should leave. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of the statement hung in the air. The maids from the Phoenix peerage gasped. Kiba couldn't suppress a smirk. Akeno's smile became genuine for the first time since Riser had arrived. Riser stared at Naruto as if he'd just grown a second head. Then he began to laugh, a loud, booming laugh that echoed in the small room. He tells Riser to leave. A human, a maggot, tells the great Riser Phoenix to leave. He wiped a theatrical tear from his eye. Rias, my dear, your pets have absolutely no manners. It seems Riser will have to teach this one its place. In a blur of motion, Riser's hand shot out, not to strike, but to grab the front of Naruto's shirt. He intended to lift him off the ground, to humiliate him, to show him the effortless, overwhelming strength of a high-class devil. His fingers closed on the fabric. And nothing happened. Naruto hadn't moved. He hadn't braced himself. He just stood there, holding his books, yet Riser couldn't budge him an inch. It was like trying to pull a mountain out of the ground by one of its trees. The smug look on Riser's face faltered, replaced by a flicker of confused disbelief. He pulled harder, his demonic strength flaring. Naruto remained completely still, his expression unchanged. He simply looked down at Riser's hand on his shirt, then back up at Riser's face. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice still perfectly calm. With a surge of fury and embarrassment, Riser let go and swung a backhand, aiming to send the insolent human flying across the room. The attack was a blur of speed, fire trailing from his fingertips. Rias cried out, "Naruto!" But the blow never landed. Naruto, still holding his books, had caught Riser's wrist in his free hand. The motion was so fluid, so casual, it was almost lazy. Yet it had perfectly intercepted the attack of a high-class devil. Riser's momentum stopped dead. "I asked you a question," Naruto said, his voice dropping an octave. The air around him seemed to grow heavy. The good-natured, easy-going student was gone. In his place was the man from the park, the one who carried a storm inside him. His blue eyes were now chips of ice. "I don't like people putting their hands on me," he squeezed. A sickening crunch of bone echoed through the room. Riser let out a yelp of pain and shock, his eyes wide with agony. He instinctively tried to pull his hand back, but Naruto's grip was like a vice forged of steel. You broke Riser's wrist," one of the maids shrieked. Almost as soon as she said it, orange flames flickered around Riser's hand, and with another soft crackle, the bones mended themselves. The pain vanished from his face, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. You dare to harm Riser," he roared, his body bursting into an inferno of orange fire. The heat was intense, forcing everyone but Naruto to take a step back. "You will burn for that, human. I will incinerate you and scatter your ashes to the wind." "Immortality," Kiba murmured, his expression grim. "The Phoenix clan's trait. It makes him reckless." Naruto seemed completely unfazed by the pillar of flame that was Riser Phoenix. He just looked at the mended wrist, his head cocked slightly. "Huh, that's a neat trick." He let go of Riser's wrist and took a deliberate step back, setting the library books down carefully on a nearby table. "Okay, you want to do this? Let's do this. But not here. You'll mess up the room." Riser's rage was so great he was practically vibrating. "You think you can dictate the terms of your own execution? This has gone far enough." Rias's voice boomed, laced with the authority of the House of Grimoire. She stepped forward, a swirling aura of red destructive energy surrounding her. "Riser, you will stand down. This is my territory, and he is under my protection." The declaration shocked everyone, including Naruto. He wasn't under her protection. He'd explicitly refused it, but he saw the look in her eyes. It was a desperate gambit, a way to shield him. Riser's fiery gaze shifted to her, his lips pulling back in a snarl. "Your protection? You would protect this worthless human over your fiancé, over the honor of your family. You disgrace yourself, Rias. He is worth 10 of you, you arrogant peacock." She shot back, her control finally snapping. "Is that so?" Riser's eyes glinted with a malevolent idea. His rage cooled, replaced by a cruel, calculating cunning. "Then let's put it to the test. You want to avoid our marriage. You think this thing is so powerful. Fine. A rating game is too much effort to waste on this trash. Let's settle it now. A one-on-one duel. Your champion," he sneered, gesturing at Naruto, "versus me." The room fell silent. Rias paled. A duel against Riser. Naruto was strong, impossibly so, but Riser was a high-class devil with legendary regenerative abilities. No matter how much damage Naruto did, Riser would just heal. It was a battle of attrition Naruto couldn't possibly win. If he wins, Riser continued, savoring the moment, I will forget this insult. I will leave and not return until the scheduled rating game. You can have your pathetic month of freedom. But when he loses, and he will lose, you will come with me to the Phoenix domain. Tonight, and you will drop this foolish challenge to our wedding. And as for the human, Riser will enjoy breaking him apart, over and over again. It was a trap, a cruel, sadistic trap. But Rias saw the ironclad logic in it. If she refused, she would look weak. Her declaration of protection meaningless. She would be admitting that her champion was no match for him, effectively conceding defeat before the rating game even began. Her political standing, and her pride, would be shattered. She looked at Naruto. He was looking back at her, his expression unreadable. He had been dragged into the middle of devil politics, all because he'd tried to return some library books. Don't, Naruto said to her, his voice low and clear. Don't agree to it for my sake. This is your business. I can handle myself. His words, meant to free her, did the opposite. They solidified her resolve. He had stood up for her and her friends. He had faced down this arrogant fool without an ounce of fear. He had shown more honor and courage than the high-born devil standing before them. She could not, would not, let him be punished for it. I accept, Rias said, her voice ringing with finality. Riser's smile was triumphant. Excellent. Graphia, a woman in AP. Rim Maid's outfit materialized in the room in a silent flash of silver light. It was Graphia Lucifuge, the queen of the Devil King Searzek's Lucifer, and Rias's sister-in-law. Her face was a mask of cool neutrality. Lord Phoenix, Lady Grimori, she said, her voice like ice. I have been observing. Lord Lucifer has authorized the creation of a dual space, should an agreement be reached. The terms are understood. Then let's not keep our audience waiting, Riser crowed. Graphia raised a hand, and a complex, silver magic circle glowed on the floor, expanding to engulf the entire room. The world dissolved into a vortex of light and pressure. When the light faded, they were no longer in the cozy club room. They were standing on a vast, floating platform of polished obsidian, under a swirling, starless purple sky. In the distance, floating tiers of spectator stands had been erected, already filled with the silent, shimmering forms of high-ranking devils, summoned from the underworld to bear witness. On a central, elevated throne sat Searzek's Lucifer himself, his crimson hair a perfect match for his sister's, his handsome face impassive. Beside him stood the imposing figure of Lord Phoenix, Riser's father. Rias and her peerage were on one side of the platform. Riser and his maids were on the other. In the center, facing each other across 50 yards of empty space, stood Naruto and Riser. Riser spread his arms, basking in the attention. Behold, human, the arena for your demise. Here, Riser can unleash his full power. And you have nowhere to run. He burst into flames again. A pair of magnificent fiery wings sprouting from his back. Naruto just looked around, taking in the bizarre pocket dimension with a detached curiosity. Nice place. A little gloomy, though. He stretched his arms over his head, his back popping. So, the rules are simple, right? I just have to beat you. Beating Riser is impossible, Riser boomed. But you are welcome to try until you are a whimpering, broken mess on the floor. Right, beat you. Got it, Naruto said, as if confirming directions. Graphia appeared in the air between them. This is an official duel under the observation of the Devil King Searzek's Lucifer. The terms are agreed upon. The fight will end upon concession, or when one party is judged unable to continue. Begin. Riser didn't wait. With a roar, he launched himself into the air and unleashed a massive fireball, a miniature sun of orange flame that streaked towards Naruto. Naruto, dodge it, Rias screamed, her heart pounding. Naruto didn't dodge, he just watched it come. At the last possible second, he raised a hand. A gust of wind, seemingly from nowhere, erupted from his palm, forming a localized whirlwind that met the fireball head-on. The two forces collided, and the fireball was not extinguished, but torn apart, its flames shredded and scattered harmlessly into the purple void. A murmur went through the crowd of observing devils. Riser's eyes widened. Wind magic. Without a circle. Impossible. Naruto lowered his hand. Are we going to talk all day, or are we going to fight? With a snarl, Riser dove, closing the distance in a flash. He threw a series of punches and kicks. Each strike wreathed in fire. Naruto met the assault with an effortless grace that was mesmerizing to watch. He didn't block. He parried, redirecting Riser's limbs with gentle pushes and open-palmed slaps. Using the devil's own momentum against him. Riser was a flurry of enraged motion. Naruto was an island of calm at the center of the storm, moving just enough, just in time. Stand still and let Riser burn you. Riser bellowed in frustration, lashing out with a wide arc of fire. This time, Naruto didn't parry. He vanished. Poof. Riser's attack passed through empty air. Naruto appeared behind him, his foot swinging in a clean, powerful sweep. It connected with the back of Riser's knees, and the mighty Phoenix Air went down to one knee with a grunt of surprise. It's the clone trick again. Issei yelled from the sidelines. But it wasn't a clone. Not this time. The speed was all Naruto. Up in the stands, Sears leaned forward slightly, his calm expression finally showing a flicker of interest. His physical prowess is extraordinary, Graphia. Indeed, my lord, the queen replied, her eyes narrowed. He is not using any detectable energy enhancement. It is as if his body's natural limit is simply higher than it should be. Riser surged to his feet, his body erupting in a nova of flame. Tricks won't save you. The flames scorched the obsidian platform, but Naruto had already leapt back. Putting distance between them, Riser, however, was done playing. He clapped his hands together. Feel the flames of the Phoenix. Hell's Inferno. A pillar of fur erupted from the ground where Naruto stood, engulfing him completely. It roared upwards, a 100-foot-high vortex of pure, destructive heat. Naruto. Rias shrieked, her face ashen. Akeno's hands flew to her mouth. Her playful demeanor gone, replaced by genuine horror. Riser stood panting, a triumphant, sadistic grin on his face. There. It is done. Not even ashes will remain. He was a fool to challenge me. The pillar of fire raged for a full 10 seconds before Riser finally allowed it to die down. The obsidian platform beneath was glowing, semi-molten. But there was no body. No ash. Nothing. He's gone, Kiba whispered. His voice hollow. Rias felt a cold dread wash over her, a feeling of loss so profound it stole her breath. She had sent him to his death. This brave, strange, powerful. Oh boy. She had sacrificed him for her own pride. Don't count him out yet, a quiet voice said beside her. It was Kaneko. The smell of sunshine. It's getting stronger. As she spoke, a figure walked calmly out of the still glowing patch of obsidian. It was Naruto. His gym clothes were singed, and there were a few minor burns on his arms, but he was otherwise completely unharmed. He brushed some soot off his shoulder. Okay, Naruto said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. That one was a little warm. My turn now. Riser stared, his jaw slack with disbelief. How are you alive? No one can survive that. Naruto didn't answer. He just stopped, closed his eyes, and stood perfectly still. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the universe seemed to hold its breath. An immense pressure descended upon the pocket dimension. It wasn't demonic. It wasn't holy. It was a physical, tangible weight, an overwhelming flood of pure, natural energy that seemed to pour out of Naruto's very being. The air grew thick, heavy, like water. The observing devils in the stands shifted uncomfortably, some of the weaker ones gasping for breath under the sheer spiritual pressure. On the Grimoire side, Akeno's eyes were wide. What is this power? It feels ancient, like the world itself is focusing on him. Rias could only stare. The void of power she had sensed before had just burst its banks. This was the ocean she had been afraid to pour into a teacup. Up on his throne, Sears Lucifer was no longer impassive. He was sitting bolt upright, his eyes wide with utter astonishment. That energy, it's not magic. It's life. The energy of the planet itself. He's drawing it in, taming it. Naruto opened his eyes. The vibrant blue had been replaced by a piercing gold, and his pupils were now horizontal bars, like those of a toad. Around his eyes, brilliant orange pigmentation had appeared, like a mask of sacred paint. This, Naruto said, his voice resonating with a newfound depth and power, is Sage Mode. Riser Phoenix, for the first time in his life, felt a prickle of genuine fear. The man standing before him no longer felt human. He felt like a god of nature, a primal force given form. "What is that? What have you done?" Riser screamed, his fear manifesting as rage. He threw another massive fireball. This time, Naruto didn't bother with a gust of wind. He held up a single finger and a ball of the natural energy, invisible to most but blindingly apparent to his sage-enhanced senses, shot forward and dissipated the attack midair. "My senses are sharper now," Naruto said, his voice unnervingly calm. "My body is stronger, and my attacks are infused with natural energy. Your fire is just fire. It's part of the natural world. And right now, I'm its master." He vanished, not with a flicker or a blur, but as if he had simply ceased to be in one place and begun to exist in another. He appeared directly in front of Riser and delivered a single, simple punch to the stomach. The impact was cataclysmic. There was a sound like a thunderclap, and a shockwave of pure force erupted from the point of contact, cracking the obsidian platform in a spiderweb pattern. Riser's eyes bulged. He didn't fly backward. He folded in half around Naruto's fist, all the air driven from his lungs in a choked gasp. Naruto retracted his fist, and Riser collapsed to the ground, twitching. A second later, the orange flames of the phoenix enveloped him, healing the ruptured organs and shattered ribs. He staggered back to his feet, coughing, a look of disbelief on his face. "See," Riser gasped, a manic grin spreading across his face. "It's useless. Riser is immortal. You can't kill me." "I know," Naruto said. "Killing you was never the point." Naruto moved again. This time it wasn't a single strike. It was a relentless, systematic deconstruction. He didn't use flashy moves. It was pure, brutal, efficient taijutsu, each blow amplified by the immense power of Sage Mode. A punch to the jaw that snapped Riser's head back. A kick to the leg that shattered his femur. An elbow to the spine that sent him crashing face first into the floor. Every time the phoenix flames brought him back, Naruto was there, waiting. He didn't give him a moment to recover, a moment to counter. He just hit him again. And again. And again. The sound of breaking bones, followed by the sizzle of regeneration, became a horrifying rhythm. The devils in the stands were silent, watching the brutal spectacle. They weren't watching a fight. They were watching a high-class, pure-blooded devil, famed for his immortality, being used as a training dummy. Lord Phoenix was on his feet, his face a mask of fury and humiliation. "This is cruel," Kiba said, unable to look away. "No," Akeno corrected, her voice a whisper. Her eyes were fixed on Naruto, on the terrifying calm with which he wielded such overwhelming power. It wasn't anger driving him. It was purpose. It's a lesson. He's showing him that his immortality is a cage, not a weapon. He's breaking his pride, not just his body. Rias watched, her heart a whirlwind of emotions. Fear, awe, and a burgeoning, overwhelming sense of gratitude that was rapidly transforming into something more. He wasn't just fighting for her. He was systematically dismantling the very concept of Riser's superiority. He was freeing her, not just from a duel, but from the entire political prison this marriage represented. He wasn't a pawn. He wasn't even her champion. He was his own king, fighting on his own terms. After what felt like an eternity, Riser lay on the ground, a broken, whimpering heap. His flames still healed him, but his spirit was shattered. He was too terrified to even get up, knowing that the moment he did, the pain would come again. Naruto stood over him, his Sage Mode still active. He slowly raised his right hand. A sound began to fill the arena, a sound more terrifying than any explosion. It was a high-pitched, piercing shriek, like a lion tiny blades grinding against each other at impossible speeds. A pinwheel of pure wind energy, spinning so fast it looked like a solid shuriken made of glass, materialized in his hand. It pulsed with an unimaginable density of power, the natural energy within it raging to be unleashed. The very air around it seemed to warp and tear. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The pressure from the technique alone forced everyone, including Rias and her peerage, to brace themselves. It felt like it could erase existence itself. Naruto looked down at the terrified riser, whose eyes were wide with a complete and total understanding of his own mortality. He could heal from a broken bone. He could not heal from being atomized on a cellular level. Naruto held the shrieking sphere of doom over Riser's head for a long, pregnant moment. The threat was absolute. He didn't need to use it. The demonstration was enough. Then, with a casual flick of his wrist, he dispelled it. The terrifying sound vanished. The pressure dissipated. He powered down from Sage mode, his eyes returning to their normal blue, the orange pigmentation fading away. He looked down at the broken devil. "Do you concede?" he asked, his voice back to its normal, calm tone. Riser trembled, unable to even speak. He just nodded frantically, tears of shame and terror streaming down his face. Graphia appeared in the center of the arena once more, her own professional composure visibly shaken. "Lord Riser Phoenix has conceded. The winner of the duel is Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto paid her no mind. He turned and walked back towards Rias, Kiba, and the others, leaving Riser sobbing on the obsidian floor. He stopped in front of Rias, a small, tired smile on his face. "Problem solved," he said. Rias stared at him, speechless. She opened her mouth to thank him, to say something. Anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, propelled by an impulse she didn't fully understand, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him in a fierce, tight hug. Naruto stiffened for a second, surprised, then slowly relaxed, patting her back awkwardly. "Hey, it's okay. He won't be bothering you again for a while." She pulled back, her face flushed, her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and a powerful, newfound admiration. "Thank you, Naruto," she whispered, the name feeling more personal, more real, than ever before. Akeno watched them, a genuine, warm smile on her face. Her fascination with Naruto had just deepened into something far more profound. That control, that terrifying calm in the face of such destructive capability, he was a paradox of peace and power. And he had used that power not for himself, but to protect her king, her friend. In the stands, Sears X Lucifer slowly began to clap. The sound was solitary at first, then a few other lords, sensing the Devil King's mood, hesitantly joined in. Sears X's smile was wide and genuine. He wasn't looking at his humiliated future brother-in-law. He was looking at the blonde human who had just shaken the foundations of the devil world. "Graphia," Sears X said, his voice low but filled with excitement. "Cancel my afternoon. I want every piece of information we have on this boy. His childhood, his parents, where he learned to do that. And get me the reports on that herald of silence, nonsense Kokobile was spouting. The old guard like the Phoenix clan may dismiss it as ravings. But I have a feeling our world is about to get much, much bigger." He looked back down at the arena, where Naruto was now being fussed over by relieved Rias and a teasing Akeno. A king in his own right. Sears X murmured to himself. How very interesting. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Thunder and Shadows. The victory over Riser Phoenix should have ushered in a period of celebration. It had, for about a day. The Grimoire peerage had returned to the Orc room in a state of giddy disbelief, with Issei leading the charge in singing Naruto's praises, his earlier fear replaced by star-struck hero worship. Kiba had given Naruto a respectful nod that was worth 1,000 words, an acknowledgement of power from one warrior to another. And Rias had been unable to take her eyes off him. The gratitude and admiration from the arena had blossomed into a soft, genuine warmth that radiated from her whenever she looked his way. But peace, Naruto was learning, was a fleeting concept in this new, hidden world. The second night after the duel, the sky above Kuo town went wrong. The air, usually crisp with the late evening chill, grew thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and old blood. A strange, oppressive dome of energy, shimmering with a sickly violet hue, had descended over the entire town, sealing it off from the outside world. To the sleeping human populace, it was nothing. To those with supernatural senses, it was a declaration of war. Naruto felt it the moment it snapped into place. He was in his small, Spartan apartment, attempting to meditate. The fragmented dreams, Of his past life had been growing more vivid since the fight with Rias, flashes of a great war, of titanic beasts made of pure energy, of a promise made to a friend with dark hair and darker eyes. A sudden shift in the world's energy jolted him from his trance. It felt like a cage had been dropped over his soul. He was on his feet in an instant, his senses stretching out, tasting the malevolent power that saturated the air. It was familiar. It had the same arrogant, contemptuous flavor as Rainer, the fallen angel from the park, but magnified 1,000 times. This wasn't a stray assassin. This was an army. His phone buzzed. It was a number he hadn't programmed, but he knew who it was. He answered. Uzumaki-kun. Rias's voice was tense, stripped of its usual regal cadence. You feel it, don't you? Hard to miss. Naruto replied, already pulling on his shoes. It feels like your friend from the park invited his boss over. Kokobile, she said, the name a curse. A leader of the Grigori. A cadre class fallen angel who survived the Great War. He's at the academy. He's created a barrier over the town. No one can get in or out. My brother can't help us. We're on our own. Naruto old hear the fear underlying her resolve. This was a different level of threat from Rias. Rias was a spoiled brat with a gimmick. This was a veteran killer, a general. I'm on my way, he said, no hesitation in his voice. Be careful, she urged. This isn't a duel. He wants to restart the Great War. He will kill anyone and everyone to achieve his goal. Yeah, well, Naruto said, a grim smile ouching his lips as he looked out his window towards the distant lights of Kuo Academy. I'm not a big fan of war. He didn't take the stairs. He opened his window, stepped out onto the ledge, and leapt. He landed silently on a neighboring rooftop and began to run, his form a blur of orange and black against the unnaturally dark sky, bounding from building to building with impossible speed and grace. The academy was his destination. The epicenter of the storm. The grounds of Kuo Academy had been transformed into a battlefield. The main school building was a cratered, smoking ruin. In the center of what used to be the athletic field stood Kokobile. He was a terrifying figure, with 10 black feathered wings that beat the air slowly, stirring up dust and debris. He sat on a makeshift throne of rubble, a crazed, ecstatic grin on his handsome face. Floating in the air around him were dozens of lesser fallen angels, their light spears held at the ready. On the ground, a pack of monstrous, multi-headed hounds. Cerberus beasts summoned from the depths of the underworld, growled and snarled, their eyes glowing with hellish light. Opposite this nightmare army stood Rias in her peerage. Issei was trembling, but his left arm was now equipped with the boosted gear, a red gauntlet pulsing with green light. Kiba had 2 demonic swords in his hands, his stance a perfect picture of readiness. Kaneko stood beside him, her small frame radiating a palpable aura of physical power. But Akeno was struggling. She stood slightly apart from the others, her hands clenched at her sides. The presence of a fallen angel cadre, a being so close in nature to her estranged father, was a physical blow. The lightning that usually danced at her fingertips was absent. Her face was pale, her usual sadistic smile replaced by a mask of deep-seated pain and self-loathing. The sight of those 10 black wings dredged up every trauma she had spent her life trying to bury. Well, Kokobile's voice boomed across the field. Dripping with mockery, the little sister of the Devil King, and her pathetic collection of misfits. And look, Barakiel's little girl, has he cast you out, little Akeno? Or did you run from your filthy heritage? It doesn't matter. Your blood is a stain on both our people. Akeno flinched as if struck. The words were poison, aimed with surgical precision at her deepest insecurities. Shut up, Rias yelled, a ball of destructive energy forming in her hand. What do you want, Kokobile? Kokobile laughed, a wild, unhinged sound. What do I want? I want what I was denied. The Great War ended in a pathetic stalemate. God is dead. The 4 great Satans are dead. And yet we sit in this cold peace, rotting from the inside. I am bored, Rias Grimori. I want to feel the thrill of battle again. I will kill you in the Sona Citries air, destroy this town, and frame the devils for it. The angels will retaliate, the devils will strike back, and Azazel will be forced to join the fray. I will give this stagnant world the glorious, bloody war it craves. As he finished his maniacal speech, a flash of blue light erupted on the far side of the field. Two figures appeared. Zenobia Quarta and Irina Shido, the exorcists they had encountered just the day before. Zenobia held the legendary holy sword, Durandal. Kokobile. Zenobia shouted. By order of the church, you are to be apprehended. Surrender now. Kokobile just cackled. The church sends 2 children with a hand-me-down sword. Michael insults me. No matter. You can all die together. He gestured, and the Cerberus hounds charged. Simultaneously, the fallen angels in the sky swooped down, their light spears raining death. The battle began. Heba and Zenobia, a temporary and uneasy alliance, met the Cerberus charge, their swords a blur of motion. Issei, with Kaneko guarding him, began the slow process of boosting his power, the gauntlet chanting every 10 seconds. Rias unleashed her power of destruction, acing a handful of the lesser fallen from existence, but more immediately took their place. It was chaos, and in the middle of it, Akeno remained frozen, a lone, vulnerable figure. A fallen angel swooped down on her. Its spear aimed at her heart. Akeno senpai, Issei screamed. Akeno saw it coming, but she couldn't move. Her body, her power, had betrayed her, shackled by the weight of her own past. She closed her eyes. The impact never came. A blur of orange dropped from the sky, landing directly between Akeno and her attacker. There was a sickening crunch, and the fallen angel was sent flying backward with a broken neck, crashing to the ground in a heap of black feathers. Naruto stood over Akeno, his back to her, shielding her. He hadn't even looked at the enemy he'd just dispatched. His attention was entirely on the main threat. Sorry I'm late, he said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. Looks like the party started without me. Naruto. Rias cried out, a wave of relief washing over her. Kokobile's insane grin faltered for a moment. He stared at Naruto from his throne of rubble. And who is this? I don't sense a devil's power, nor a human's prayer. What are you? Just a guy who's about to crash your party. Naruto replied. He glanced back over his shoulder at Akeno, who was staring at his back, her eyes wide with shock. You okay, Akeno-senpai? She couldn't find her voice. She just nodded mutely. Naruto gave her a small, reassuring smile before turning his full attention to the battlefield. He made a familiar hand sign. Let's even the odds a little. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a series of 20 successive poofs, an army of Narutos appeared on the field. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The tide of the battle turned instantly. Half the clones surged forward, engaging the Cerberus hounds. They didn't fight with swords. They used pure, brutal taijutsu, their fists and feet striking with the force of sledgehammers. A Cerberus lunged, only to be met with a perfectly timed uppercut from a clone that sent it flying into the air, where another clone was waiting to smash it back down to the earth. The other 10 clones met the charge of the fallen angels. They leapt into the air, using each other as springboards, just as they had against Rainer. They were a whirlwind of orange, intercepting light spears with their bare hands and dispatching their wielders with swift, decisive blows. The original Naruto stood his ground, his eyes locked on Kokobile. He knew that the clones were just a distraction. The grunts didn't matter, only the general did. Kokobile watched the systematic destruction of his forces with a look of growing fury. His plan, his glorious war, was being dismantled by a single, unknown entity and his bizarre army of duplicates. You, he roared, rising from his throne, his 10 wings beating furiously. You are no mere human. I will deal with you myself. He shot forward, a black comet of rage and power, a massive spear of light forming in his hands. Naruto met his charge. He entered Sage mode in an instant, the golden eyes and orange pigmentation snapping into place. The natural energy of the world flooded him, a familiar, powerful embrace. The two forces collided in the center of the field with the force of a meteor strike. The ground buckled, and a shockwave erupted outwards, sending dust and debris flying. The remaining combatants, devil, fallen, and exorcist alike, were forced to brace themselves against the sheer force of the impact. Naruto had caught Kokobile's light spear on the palm of his hand. The holy energy sizzled against his sage-infused skin, but it couldn't pierce it. Impressive, Kokobile grunted, pushing forward, the spear glowing brighter. You can harness natural energy. A sage. There hasn't been And a proper one in this world in centuries. Good, Naruto replied through gritted teeth, the pressure immense. Then I can give you a proper welcome. He shoved back, creating a sliver of space, and formed a Rasengan in his free hand. He thrust it forward, but Kokobile was a veteran of the Great War. He was not riser. He dodged, beating his wings to gain altitude, and unleashed a torrent of light spears from above. Naruto leapt back, the ground where he'd stood erupting in a series of fiery explosions. This was a true high-stakes battle, a dance of gods. Naruto used his clones not just for attack, but for strategy. A clone would appear on Kokobile's flank, forcing him to divert his attention, giving the real Naruto an opening. Another would create a Rasengan as a feint, drawing an attack while the true strike came from below. It was a dazzling, terrifying display of tactical genius and raw power. He was holding his own against a Cadre-class being who had fought against the original Satans and the Seraphs of Heaven. From the sidelines, Rias and the others could only watch in awe. They were fighting their own battles against the remnants of Kokobile's forces, but the main event was clear. He's pushing Kokobile back, Zenobia said, her voice filled with disbelief. Durandal felt heavy in her hands as she stared at the human who was fighting a battle far beyond her own capabilities. But the fight was taking a toll. Sage mode had a time limit. Naruto could feel his connection to natural energy waning. He needed to end this, and soon. He saw Akeno, still standing alone, watching the battle with a look of profound conflict on her face. She was caught between two worlds, her past and her present, and it was tearing her apart. He knew that feeling. He remembered a similar conflict in his dreams. A battle against a friend he was desperate to save from his own darkness. During a brief lull, as Kokobile paused in the air to gather his power for a massive attack, Naruto flickered over to Akeno's side. The clones and the others were holding the line, giving him this precious few seconds. Akeno, he said, his voice soft but firm. He didn't look at her with pity. He looked at her with understanding. She flinched, unable to meet his gaze. I can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. This power, this blood, it's foul. I hate it. I hate what I am. Why? Naruto asked, a simple, direct question. She looked up at him, shocked. Why? Because my father is a fallen angel. My mother was killed because of it. This power is the reason I lost everything. It's a curse. Is it? Naruto countered, his golden sage eyes holding hers. The power you have, the lightning, the wings you keep hidden, is it evil? Or is it just power? Is a knife evil, or does it depend on the hand that holds it? He reached out, not touching her, but his presence was a warm, solid thing. I can feel it, you know. With this, he tapped his own temple. In sage mode, I can feel the energy of everything. And I can feel the energy inside you. It's not just the fallen angel power you hate. It's the holy power you inherited from your mother, too. You hate it all because it's mixed. Because you think it makes you impure. Tears welled in Akeno's eyes. He saw it. He saw all of it. He saw the core of her pain, the self-loathing she had hidden for so long behind a sadistic smile and a teasing demeanor. I don't care where your power comes from, Akeno, Naruto said, his voice ringing with absolute sincerity. I don't care if it's from an angel, a devil, a fallen, or a ramen stand. It's your power. It's part of you, and I would never, ever ask you to be ashamed of who you are. His words struck her like a physical blow. Not an attack, but a wave of pure, unconditional acceptance. It was something she had craved her entire life but never thought she would receive. Someone saw all of her, the darkness and the light, the parts she hated and the parts she feared, and didn't flinch. He didn't try to fix her. He just accepted her. Something inside her, a wall she had been building since childhood, cracked. Who I am, she whispered. You're Akeno Himahima, he said with a small smile. You make great tea, you have a scary smile, and you're Rias's best friend. You're one of us. That's all that matters. He turned back to the battle. But right now, we need your help. I can't beat him alone. Rias can't. We need your strength. All of it. He didn't wait for an answer. He launched himself back into the fray, creating a massive Rasengan to intercept the devastating attack Kokobile had just launched. A sphere of dark light that threatened to vaporize half the campus. The collision was immense, and Naruto was sent skidding back, his sage mode flickering. Akeno watched him, her heart pounding. He needs me. It was a simple thought, but it was a revolutionary one. For so long, she had felt like a burden, a contaminated asset. But he saw her as a comrade. He saw her strength as a necessity. He accepts me. She took a deep, shuddering breath, and for the first time, she didn't push her heritage away. She embraced it. So be it, she whispered. A brilliant golden light flared from her back. A single pair of holy angel wings, radiant and pure. A split second later, a pair of black, demonic fallen angel wings erupted alongside them. And then, crackling with raw, untamed power, a pair of black leather devil wings, a symbol of her reincarnation under Rias, joined them. 3 pairs of mismatched wings, a testament to her unique, chaotic existence. But the most dramatic change was the energy pouring from her. A storm of golden lightning, holy power inherited from her mother, began to crackle around her. But it was intertwined with bolts of pure black demonic energy. Holy and demonic, light and dark. A combination that should have been impossible, a paradox of power, swirled around her in a beautiful, terrifying tempest. She was the priestess of thunder and light. Era, she said. But her voice was different now. The teasing lilt was there, but it was backed by an ocean of newfound power and confidence. A real, genuine, dangerous smile spread across her face. To think a simple blonde boy would be the one to make me accept myself. I'll have to thank him properly later. She rose into the air, a goddess of storms, and pointed a finger at Kokobile. Ma, SSIVE bolt of intertwined holy and demonic lightning, a spear of pure paradox, shot across the battlefield and slammed into the cadre's side. Kokobile roared in pain and fury. Holy energy was anathema to him, and the demonic power mixed with it made it even more volatile. He whirled to face this new threat, his eyes wide with shock at the sight of Akeno in her full glory. Barakiel's daughter, you embrace that filthy power. This, filthy power, Akeno said, her voice echoing with thunder, is about to send you back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Naruto, recovering from the last clash, looked up and grinned. Now we're talking. His sage mode was fading fast. He had one last big shot. He began to gather the last dregs of natural energy, creating 2 Rasengans, one in each hand. The dynamic of the fight shifted completely. With Akeno providing devastating long-range support, her holy lightning forcing Kokobile onto the defensive, Naruto was free to press the attack. Issei. Now, Rias commanded. On it, Bushu. Issei yelled. His boosted gear, having charged for the entire battle, was glowing with an almost blinding light. Welsh Dragon, Balance Breaker. The gauntlet roared. A suit of crimson dragon-themed armor enveloped him. He had achieved his scale mail. Give your power to Naruto Senpai. Rias ordered. Boost, 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 transfer. A massive wave of Onic energy surged from Issei and poured into Naruto. It wasn't natural energy, but it was pure power, and Naruto's chakra network, the foundation of his strength, absorbed it like a sponge. It wasn't the same as Sage Mode, but it was a colossal amplification. He felt his fading strength return tenfold. Thanks for the loan, Issei. Naruto yelled, his twin Rasengans swelling in size, amplified by the dragon's power. He shot forward. Akeno unleashed a blinding storm of holy lightning, pinning Kokobile in place. Kiba and Xenovia cut down the last of the Cerberus hounds. Rias blasted the few remaining fallen angels out of the sky. The entire field was clear. It was just Naruto and Kokobile. This ends now, Naruto roared, closing the final distance. Kokobile, battered and burned by Akeno's assault, raised his arms to defend himself, a look of desperation on his face. You cannot defeat me. I am Kokobile. Naruto didn't answer with words. He slammed the twin, dragon-boosted Rasengans into Kokobile's chest. The impact was deafening. The grinding, tearing vortex of the twin spheres, amplified by the power of the Welsh dragon, was more than the cadre's body could handle. His armor shattered. His skin cracked. His 10 wings were shredded into a rain of black feathers. He was blasted backward, not as a solid form, but as a disintegrating collection of parts, crashing into the ruined remains of the school building, which finally collapsed on top of him in a cloud of dust and debris. Silence. The oppressive barrier over the town flickered and died. The natural night sky, with its stars and moon, returned. The battle was over. Naruto stood panting in the center of the field, the dragon energy fading from him. The clones had all vanished. He was exhausted, but he was standing. Akeno floated down gently, her mismatched wings folding behind her. She landed beside him, the storm of lightning receding, leaving only a faint, pleasant smell of ozone. She looked at him, her violet eyes, soft and filled with an emotion he had never seen in them before. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," she said, her voice a quiet, heartfelt whisper. Before he could respond, a white lance of light, impossibly fast, shot out from the rubble. It wasn't from Kokobile, it was something else. It materialized from nothing, a forgotten power Kokobile had been safeguarding. Naruto's senses, dulled by exhaustion, barely registered it. He tried to move, but his body was too spent. He didn't need to. Akeno moved first. She threw herself in front of him, a shield of mismatched wings wrapping around them both. But even that wouldn't be enough. Suddenly, a flash of white, even faster than the lance, intercepted it. A figure appeared, clad in gleaming silver armor, with 6 pairs of angelic wings and holding a glowing spear. It was the valiant Lucifer, leader of the Chaos Brigade, wielding the divine dividing. He had absorbed the attack. Well, Valley said, his voice calm and disinterested, as he looked down at the defeated Kokobile, who was being dragged from the rubble by a blue-haired man. "What a mess you've made, old man. Azazel is going to be very annoyed." He glanced over at Naruto and Akeno, his eyes lingering on Naruto for a moment. A human sage and the daughter of Barakiel. How interesting. He gave them a final, enigmatic smile. This was a fun little show. But the real game hasn't even started yet. With that, he and his companion vanished, taking the defeated Kokobile with them. The true purpose of Kokobile's attack, to create a diversion for Valley to steal the Excalibur fragments, was complete. But to those on the field, it was just another layer of chaos. But Naruto's attention wasn't on the vanished white dragon. It was on Akeno, who was still standing protectively in front of him. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. She turned, her expression a mix of relief and lingering vulnerability. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. "Yes, I did," she replied, her voice firm. "You stood up for me. You showed me that I didn't have to be ashamed. It's my turn to protect you." In that moment, under the quiet stars of the restored night sky, their bond was forged. It was no longer fascination or curiosity. It was trust. It was acceptance. It was the beginning of a deep, unshakable affection, born in the heart of battle and sealed with a simple, profound truth. He saw her, all of her. And he wasn't afraid. Rias watched them from a distance, a complex swirl of emotions on her face. Relief, awe, and a tiny, unfamiliar pang of jealousy that was quickly replaced by a warm sense of pride. Her family was growing stronger. And the quiet, blonde enigma at the center of it all was proving to be more than just a powerful ally. He was becoming their anchor. But, as he looked at the rubble where Kokobile had fallen, Naruto couldn't shake the fallen angel's final, manic words before Valley had appeared. Kokobile hadn't been laughing about God or the Satans. He'd been laughing about something else entirely. "Fools, you squabble over a corpse's throne while the true void, the Ender, prepares to wipe the board clean." The coming silence. The Ender. The words echoed in his mind. A chilling premonition of a war far greater than the one they had just survived. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Nekomata's Choice. The week following the battle with Kokobile was a street-range collage of recovery and revelation. Kuo Academy was officially closed for emergency renovations, a convenient cover for the Grimoire and Sea-Tree peerages to magically restore the cratered campus. Issei was grappling with the monumental power and responsibility of his new balance breaker armor. Akeno, for her part, was a changed woman. The suffocating self-loathing was gone, replaced by a radiant, almost intimidating confidence. She no longer hid her mixed heritage, she reveled in it, her holy lightning now a common sight in training, much to the awe and slight terror of her peers. Her teasing of Naruto had taken on a new, more intimate quality, laced with a genuine affection that was impossible to miss. Rias, observing all of this, found her own feelings for Naruto solidifying from strategic admiration into something deeply personal. He hadn't just saved her from a political marriage, he had protected her territory, strengthened her peerage, and, most importantly, healed her oldest friend in a way she never could have. He was becoming indispensable, not as a weapon, but as a part of their makeshift family. Naruto, meanwhile, was trying to find his equilibrium. He had faced two major threats and revealed a significant portion of his power. The leaders of the three factions now knew who he was. Sears had sent a polite but firm request, via a still-shaken Graphia, for a formal meeting in the near future. Azazel, the governor of the fallen angels, had sent a message through a low-level subordinate that was far more casual but no less pointed. Nice moves, kid. Let's grab a drink sometime. I want to know where you learned to tame nature. P.S. Sorry about Kokabeel, he was always a hothead. He was no longer an unknown variable. He was a person of interest on the world stage, a position he had never sought and did not want. His quiet life was over. The new crisis, when it came, did not arrive with the force of an invading army, but with the subtlety of a shadow slipping through a crack in the door. It began with Kaneko Tuju. The quiet, white-haired rook of the Grimoire peerage had been growing increasingly withdrawn. She was eating less, a truly alarming CGN for anyone who knew her appetite, and could often be found staring into the distance, a flicker of fear in her golden eyes. She flinched at sudden movements and had started wearing a pair of black cat ear headphones. Not to listen to music, but seemingly to block something out. Rias was worried, but her attempts to talk to Kaneko were met with monosyllabic denials. It was Naruto who finally broke through. He found her one afternoon sitting alone on a bench overlooking the now-repaired athletic field, clutching a bag of snacks she hadn't opened. He didn't press her with questions. He just sat down beside her, unwrapped a chocolate bar from his own pocket, broke it in half, and held a piece out to her. You look like you could use this more than me, he said simply. Kaneko stared at the accolade for a long moment before taking it. I'm fine, she mumbled, though her voice lacked conviction. Liar, Naruto said, not unkindly. He popped his half of the chocolate into his mouth. You smell scared and sad. His sage training wasn't active, but his senses were naturally far more acute than a normal human's, and Kaneko's emotional state was practically screaming at him. She flinched, pulling her knees up to her chest. I keep hearing things. A voice calling my name. Sharon. Naruto's brow furrowed. Sharon. He knew from a debriefing with Rias that it was her birth name. It's my sister, Kaneko whispered. Her voice barely audible. She's calling to me. She wants me to go back. To be like her. The fear in her eyes was palpable now. I don't want to. I don't want to be a monster. Before Naruto could ask what she meant, a sudden, powerful surge of magical energy flared to life in the center of Kuo town. It was a strange energy, wild and instinctual, different from the O.R.D.E.R.E.D. power of devils or the righteous light of angels. Rias and her peerage felt it from the Orc building. Naruto felt it from the bench. It was a summons, a challenge. She's here, Kaneko whispered, her body trembling. Naruto's expression hardened. Stay here with the others. He stood up. I'll go check it out. No, Kaneko said, surprising him by grabbing the hem of his jacket. I have to go. It's my problem. Naruto looked down at her, at the terror and resolve warring in her eyes. He understood that feeling, the need to face something that was uniquely yours to bear. He gave a firm nod. Okay, but I'm going with you. They arrived at the designated meeting point, an abandoned industrial warehouse district by the town's shipping port, to find Rias, Akeno, Kiba, and Issei already there. The Grimoire peerage had mobilized instantly. They stood at the entrance to a massive, dark warehouse, the source of the energy pulsating from within. Kaneko-chan, Rias said, relief and concern warring on her face. You shouldn't be here, she insisted, Naruto said, stepping up beside Rias. And she's not alone. Rias looked at him, then at her trembling rook, and acquiesced with a grim nod. Together, they entered the cavernous warehouse. The interior was vast and filled with shadows, the only light coming from holes in the rusted roof. In the center of the space, lounging atop a stack of shipping containers, was a woman. She had long black hair tied into a ponytail, stunning features, and a voluptuous figure barely contained by a black kimono worn outrageously loose. 2 black cat ears twitched atop her head, and 2 long, black tails swished lazily behind her. The aura of wild, powerful Yujutsu and Senjutsu radiated from her. She was beautiful, playful, and radiated a level of danger that put her in a class all by herself. This was Kuroka Tuju, one of the most wanted SS-rank stray devils in the underworld. "Sharon, darling," Kuroka purred, her voice a sultry melody. She hopped down from the containers, landing as silently as a cat. Her golden eyes, identical to Kaniko's, were fixed on her sister. "You finally came. I was getting so tired of waiting, Nya." Kaniko flinched at the nickname and the cat-like verbal tick, hiding behind Rias. "Kuroka," Rias said, her voice hard as steel. "You are an SS-rank criminal. Your presence here is a violation of my territory. State your purpose, or we will eliminate you." Kuroka's playful smile widened, becoming a predator's grin. "So formal, little Grimoire. I'm not here for you. I'm here for family." Her gaze softened as it landed on Kaniko again. "I'm here to liberate my precious little sister from her enslavement to you devils. It's time for you to come home, Sharon. To embrace what you are." "I'm not going with you," Kaniko stated, her voice shaking but firm. "You're a murderer. You killed our master." The playful air around Kuroka vanished in an instant, replaced by a flash of cold fury. "I did what was necessary. That pathetic devil was trying to experiment on you, to force your power out before your body was ready. He would have broken you. I saved you. You abandoned me," Kaniko retorted, her own anger finally breaking through her fear. "I protected you." Kuroka shot back. "I drew all the heat, became the villain, so you could live a quiet life. But look at you now, a pet for a noble house, suppressing your true nature. Denying your own power. I won't allow it. I will force your Nekomata power to awaken, and you will see that I was right." Her aura exploded outwards, a torrent of senju, su and yujutsu that dwarfed anything they had felt before, save for Kokobile. This was the power of a sage, but a different kind from Naruto's, wilder, more instinctual, rooted in her yokai nature. "I won't let you touch her," Rias declared, her own crimson aura of destruction flaring to life. Kuroka just laughed. "You can't stop me, little girl." She made a gesture, and a dozen magic circles appeared in the air around the Grimoire peerage, each one glowing with poisonous, debilitating magic. Before she could activate them, they all shattered into nothingness. Kuroka blinked, her concentration broken. She looked around, confused. Her spells hadn't been countered by demonic power. They had just stopped working. "I'm going to have to agree with the redhead on this one," Naruto's voice said, calm and clear. He had moved, so smoothly that almost no one had noticed, to stand directly in front of Kaniko, forming a human shield. "You're not touching her." Kuroka's golden eyes narrowed, focusing on him for the first time. She scanned him, her sage senses far more acute than any devil's. What she felt made her pause. It was the same as what Rias had felt, but from a sage's perspective, it was even more baffling. He was a void, a blank spot in the world's energy. But beneath that void, she could feel something else, a deep, still, immense reservoir of natural energy, perfectly calm and contained. It was like looking at a placid lake and sensing the infinite ocean beneath it. "And who are you, Nya?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. "You're no devil, but you feel like me. A sage, but you're human. How?" "Long story," Naruto said. "The short version is, you need to leave your sister alone. She's made her choice." "Choice?" Kuroka scoffed. "She's a child who's been brainwashed into fearing her own strength. I will show her the truth." She lunged, not at Rias or the others, but directly at Naruto, her movements a silent, fluid blur. Her claws, laced with poisonous senjutsu, aimed to rip his throat out. Naruto didn't move, he simply entered sage mode. The effect was instantaneous. The orange pigmentation flared around his eyes, his pupils snapped into horizontal bars, and the immense, controlled pressure of his natural energy filled the warehouse. Kuroka, a master of senjutsu herself, felt it like a physical blow. His sage mode was different. Hers was a partnership with nature, a give and take that allowed her to tap into its power. His was mastery, It felt as if nature itself was willingly bending to his will. The sheer density and purity of the energy he commanded was on a completely different level. She was a stream, he was the ocean. Her attack, which had been aimed at a human, was now aimed at a force of nature. Her instincts screamed at her to stop, but it was too late. Naruto caught her wrist, his grip like iron. The poisonous senjutsu coating her claws dissipated on contact with his own, more potent natural energy, neutralized completely. Your senjutsu is wild, Naruto said, his voice the calm rumble of a distant earthquake. Powerful, but unfocused. You let your emotions drive it. That's a weakness. Kuroka's eyes widened in shock. He wasn't just blocking her. He was analyzing her power at its core. She tried to pull back, but his grip was absolute. She lashed out with her other hand, firing a blast of Yujutsu, spatial magic designed to disorient and displace. Naruto didn't even flinch. He simply tightened his grip, and a pulse of his own natural energy flowed up her arm. It didn't harm her. It just disrupted her. It was like pouring a gallon of pure water into a cup of tea. Her own chaotic senjutsu sputtered, her connection to nature momentarily severed. The Yujutsu blast fizzled out a foot from his face. What are you? She whispered, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. Her greatest weapon, the sage arts that made her an SS rank threat, were useless against him. He was a perfect counter. I'm the guy who understands what it's like to do terrible things for someone you love, Naruto said, his golden eyes boring into hers. He wasn't looking at her like an enemy. He was looking at her with a startling, unnerving empathy. I understand wanting to protect your family, no matter the cost. His words struck a chord deep inside her, disarming her more effectively than any attack. This wasn't the fight she had expected. She had come prepared for devils and exorcists, for judgment and condemnation. She was not prepared for understanding. But this, Naruto continued, his voice firm but not angry, this isn't protecting her. This is hurting her. Can't you feel it? He didn't let go of her wrist. Instead, using his sage-enhanced senses, he created a link. He didn't invade her mind. He just let her feel what he was feeling, the raw, undiluted terror and sadness pouring off of Kaneko. He showed Kuroka her own actions through the lens of her sister's fear. The liberation she was offering felt like a violation. The power she wanted to awaken felt like a curse. The sister she loved was terrified of her. Tears sprang to Kuroka's eyes as the wave of her sister's pain washed over her. She saw herself not as a savior, but as a monster. The very thing she'd fought to prevent her sister from becoming. Her aggressive posture crumbled, the fight draining out of her completely. She slumped in his grip, the strength leaving her limbs. Naruto gentled his hold on her wrist. She's not your enemy, Kuroka. And she's not weak. She's just scared. You're going about this all wrong. From behind them, Rias and the others watched, stunned into silence. The battle they had prepared for, a life or death struggle against one of the underworld's most dangerous criminals, had been diffused in moments. Naruto hadn't won by overwhelming force. Though he clearly could have. He had won through empathy. He had defeated her by understanding her. Kuroka, Kaneko whispered, stepping out from behind Rias. She saw her sister, not as a terrifying monster, but as a weeping, broken-hearted woman. Kuroka looked at her sister, shame and regret warring on her face. Sharon. I'm sorry. It was at that moment that a dozen magic circles, different from Kuroka's, flared to life around the warehouse. A team of devils in combat armor teleported in, led by a stern-faced devil with an aristocratic bearing. It was a patrol squad from the Grimoire security forces, alerted by the SS rank energy signature. Kuroka the Nekomata, the lead devil shouted, pointing an energy spear at her. You are under arrest. Surrender or be destroyed. Kuroka's head snapped up, her fear instantly replaced by a cornered animal's snarl. Her instincts took over. She was a wanted criminal. Surrender meant execution. But before she could lash out, before the devils could attack, Naruto stepped in front of her, shielding her from the new arrivals. Stand down, Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying an absolute authority that made the patrol squad pause. Sir, that is an SS rank stray. The leader protested. She is a danger to Lord Grimoire's territory. She is no longer a threat, Naruto stated. He turned his head to look at Rias, a silent question in his eyes. He had subdued the enemy. Now, the political reality of the situation fell to her. She could turn Kuroka in, earn accolades for capturing a notorious criminal, and rid herself of a problem. It was the logical, correct move for a devil noble. Rias looked at Kuroka, then at Kaneko, who was staring at her sister with a heartbreaking expression of conflict. She saw the tears on Kuroka's face, the genuine remorse brought about by Naruto's intervention. Then she looked at Naruto, who stood protecting a wanted criminal, not because it was strategic, but because he saw a broken family that could still be mended. He was teaching her another lesson. Power wasn't just about winning battles or managing territory. It was about having the strength to choose a different path. Rias took a deep breath, making a decision that would have her ancestors spinning in their graves. He is right, she declared, her voice ringing with the authority of the Gremory name. The situation is resolved. She is under my custody now. The patrol leader gaped at her. Lady Gremory, you cannot be serious. Harboring her is a crime. She is under his custody, Rias corrected, gesturing to Naruto. As a special operative and consultant affiliated with the House of Gremory. His victory, his prize. Is that not how it works? She was improvising, creating a political fiction on the spot, but her tone dared anyone to challenge her. Akeno stepped forward, a dangerous smile on her face, crackling lightning dancing on her fingertips. You heard our king. The matter is settled, or would you like to dispute her decision? The patrol leader, faced with the combined pressure of the Gremory heiress, her formidable queen, and the terrifyingly calm sage who had just pacified Kuroka without a scratch, wisely chose to back down. As you command, Lady Gremory. With a grumble, he and his squad teleported away. The warehouse fell silent again. Kuroka stared at Naruto, then at Rias, her mind reeling. She had been defeated, captured, and then, in the span of 30 seconds, granted a pardon she had never dreamed possible. They had the power and the right to destroy her, but they had chosen to save her. Why? Kuroka whispered, her voice hoarse. Naruto turned to her, his sage mode receding. Because everyone deserves a second chance, he said, his expression softening. And because she, he nodded towards Kaneko, deserves to have her sister back. The real you, not the monster you were pretending to be. He offered a hand to her. This doesn't mean you're forgiven for what you did. It means you have a chance to make it right. You'll live here, under our supervision. You'll be close to your sister. You'll prove you can be trusted. It's a better deal than execution, don't you think? Kuroka looked at his outstretched hand, then at her tearful sister, then at the devil heiress who had just risked her political standing to protect her. In her world of betrayal and violence, such an act of mercy, backed by such overwhelming strength, was unheard of. Her fierce Nekomata pride, which had driven her to become one of the most feared beings in the underworld, bent and then broke, reforging itself into something new. Loyalty. A fierce, unwavering, absolute loyalty to the strange human sage who had seen the desperate sister behind the SS-rank criminal. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. I accept, NYA. Later that night, the Occult Research Club room had 3 new occupants. Kuroka sat awkwardly on one end of the couch, sipping a cup of tea Akeno had given her. Kaneko sat on the other end, stealing furtive glances at her sister, the years of fear slowly beginning to recede. And Naruto sat between them, a silent, stabilizing presence. Rias watched them from her desk, a small, genuine smile on her face. Her peerage, her family, was growing in the most unconventional way imaginable. She had a half-fallen, a perverted dragon emperor, a holy sword-obsessed knight, and now she had taken in 2 Nekomata sages. One of whom was a legendary fugitive. And the architect of it all was the blonde enigma who had refused to be her servant. He wasn't a pawn or a king in her game anymore. He was building his own board, with his own rules, and Rias found, to her own surprise, that she was more than willing to play. Akeno and Kuroka, she suspected, felt the same way. They were all, in their own ways, being drawn into his orbit, not by a spell or a command, but by the sheer, magnetic force of his character. He built his family not from chess pieces, but from broken parts he refused to throw away. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. Whispers of Silence. The invitation, when it arrived, was not a piece of paper but an event. Graphia Lucifuge appeared in the Occult Research Club room in a silent shimmer of silver light. Her expression as unreadable as ever. She bowed crisply to Rias, but her message was for Naruto. Lord Sears Lucifer, Lord Michael, and Governor Azazel request your presence at an emergency summit. She announced, her voice leaving no room for refusal. The recent unauthorized actions of Kokobile and the emergence of a new, unclassified power on the world stage necessitate a formal discussion. Your attendance is not optional. The air in the room grew heavy. This was it, the moment Naruto was officially dragged from the shadows and placed under the microscope of the most powerful beings in the world. I will accompany him, Rias stated immediately, rising from her desk. He is affiliated with the House of Grimoire. I will represent my family's interest in this matter. As will we, Akeno added, her smile sharp. She stood beside Naruto, a silent declaration of solidarity. Kuroka, lounging on the couch, stretched like a cat and let out a soft, "Nya." Her golden eyes fixed on Naruto with unwavering loyalty. If he was going, she was going. Graphia's gaze swept over the united front. Rias, the Grimoire heiress. Akeno, the priestess of holy lightning and daughter of a Grigori Kadri. Kuroka, the SS-ranked Nekomata sage. And Naruto, the human sage who had defeated a Phoenix and held his own against Kokobile. It was a terrifyingly potent and politically chaotic entourage. Lord Sears anticipated this, Graphia said with a sigh that was the closest she ever came to showing frustration. Your presence is permitted, Lady Grimoire, as is that of your queen. Kuroka-san will remain here. Her presence at a faction summit would be overly provocative. Kuroka pouted but acquiesced with a nod from Naruto. He didn't need a bodyguard for a political meeting. Very well, Rias agreed. When and where? Now, Graphia said, and a massive, intricate teleportation circle, emblazoned with the crests of the Grimoire, Lucifer, and Baal houses, expanded to fill the room. The neutral ground has been prepared. The sensation of high-level teleportation was disorienting, like being pulled through the eye of a needle. When the world solidified again, they were in a place that defied logic. It appeared to be an immense, circular chamber, floating in a void of swirling nebula. The floor was polished white marble, and in the center stood a single, large round table. 3 thrones were positioned around it. One was occupied by Sears Lucifer. The Devil King was dressed in his formal crimson and black attire, his presence an overwhelming wave of calm, controlled demonic power. To his right sat a man of breathtaking beauty, with long golden hair and a serene expression, from whose back 12 radiant white wings unfolded. This was the Archangel Michael, leader of the Seraphs and acting head of heaven. Across from them, lounging in his throne with a casual slouch that belied his immense power, was a man with black hair, golden bangs, and 12 black fallen angel wings. Azazel, governor of the fallen angels and head of the Grigori, offered them a lazy, curious grin. The leaders of the 3 great factions, the most powerful beings in their world, gathered in one place. Rias and Akeno both gave formal bows. Naruto simply stood, his hands in his pockets, his gaze sweeping over the 3 leaders with a calm, analytical curiosity. He felt no fear, he just felt, wait. The combined power in this room was enough to unmake planets. Naruto Uzumaki, Sears began, his voice pleasant but resonant with power. Thank you for coming, and thank you, Rias, Akeno, for accompanying him. Quote, it is an honor, my lord, Lord Michael, Governor Azazel, Rias said, her etiquette perfect. Cut the formalities, Sears Azazel said, leaning forward and resting his chin on his hand. His eyes fixed on Naruto. Let's get to it, kid, I'll be blunt. What the hell are you? The question was rude, direct, and exactly what was on everyone's mind. Naruto met his gaze without flinching. I'm human. Quote, humans don't create solid clones, master natural energy to a degree I haven't seen in 1,000 years, and go toe-to-toe with my rogue warmongers, Azazel shot back, his grin widening. I run the world's foremost institution on sacred gears. You don't have one. Your energy is a complete blank to our sensors. So, I'll ask again. What are you? He is what he says he is. A gentle voice interjected. It was Michael. The Archangel's smile was kind, but his eyes held an ancient, piercing wisdom. The system does not register him as anything else. He possesses a human soul. However, it is an exceptionally old and powerful soul, one that has been reforged many times. He looked at Naruto with profound curiosity. It's as if you were a grand river that has been forced into the path of a small stream. The potential for a flood is immense. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Reforged. The word resonated with the fragmented dreams of his past life. So, a reincarnated soul. Searsex mused. Not unheard of, but one of this magnitude is a first. He turned his full attention to Naruto. Your power, this, sage mode, it is not magic. It is the art of gathering the world's own energy. An art lost to devils and angels alike. Where did you learn it? I just know it, Naruto said honestly. It's instinct. Like breathing. Azazel let out a low whistle. A natural-born sage. A prodigy of a forgotten art. No wonder Kokobile was so rattled. He leaned back. Well, that answers one question. But it opens up 100 more. The biggest one being, what do we do with you? You're a tactical asset on the level of a Satan or a Seraph, but you have no allegiance. You're a king with no kingdom, a nuke with no launch codes. His allegiance is with my sister, Searsex said, giving Rias a brief, proud smile. He has acted in defense of the Grimoire name and territory. For that, the underworld is grateful. Grateful, but wary, Azazel countered. The old houses are terrified of him. An unknown power upsetting the status quo. They're already pressuring you to put a leash on him, aren't they, Searsex? Searsex's pleasant expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened slightly, confirming Azazel's words. This was the heart of the matter. They weren't just curious about his power. They were deciding his place in the world, whether he liked it or not. He was being weighed and measured like a weapon. Before Naruto could respond to the uncomfortable political maneuvering, a new feeling pricked at his senses. It was subtle at first, a pinprick wrongness in the fabric of the pocket dimension. He straightened up, his casual demeanor vanishing. Something's coming, he said, his voice low. The three leaders immediately went on high alert. What do you mean? Searsex asked. This dimension is sealed. Nothing can enter without my express permission. It's not entering, Naruto said, his sage-honed senses stretching out. It's already here. It's growing. Like a whole. As he spoke, the very texture of the air in the chamber began to change. A profound cold seeped into the room, a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It was a coldness of the soul, a chilling emptiness that seemed to leach the very meaning from existence. The vibrant colors of the nebula outside the chamber began to dull, fading to a monochromatic gray. Igor began to coalesce in the center of the room. It wasn't a teleportation. It was more like the universe was reluctantly sketching it into being. The figure was humanoid, clad in simple, featureless gray robes. It had no face, only a smooth, blank expanse of cloth where features should be. It carried no weapon. Its presence was a gaping void, an anti-energy that didn't radiate power but absorbed it. What is this? Michael whispered, rising from his throne, his serene expression replaced by one of alarm. A spear of pure holy light formed in his hand. Intruder, Searsex commanded, his own crimson aura of destruction flaring to life. Identify yourself. The gray-robed figure did not speak. It simply raised a hand. The gesture was not threatening, but what happened next was terrifying. Michael hurled his spear of light. It was an attack that could smite the most powerful of demons, an embodiment of divine judgment. As it flew towards the figure, it simply fizzled out. The holy light unraveled, the divine concept behind it nullified, until it was just a faint shimmer that dissipated into nothingness a few feet from the intruder. Michael's eyes went wide with disbelief. Azazel, ever the scientist, acted next. He summoned a dozen miniature magic circles, each a complex array for a different elemental attack: fire, ice, lightning. He unleashed them all at once. The spells shot forward and met the same fate. They vanished, not countered, not blocked. They were simply erased from existence before they could reach their target. It's a nullification field, Azazel shouted, a look of grim fascination on his face. It's not blocking magic, it's unmaking the principles behind it. This is conceptual level interference. The figure took a silent step forward. Searsex acted, unleashing a stream of his power of destruction. This was not mere magic. It was the antithesis of existence, the power to erase anything it touched. It was the ultimate demonic power. The crimson energy surged towards the figure. And for a moment, it seemed to work. The robed form flickered, the space around it warping. But then, with an immense, silent effort, the power of destruction itself began to decay. Its crimson glow turning a sick gray before dissolving completely. Searsek staggered back a step, his eyes wide with utter shock. His power, the legendary power of the House of Baal, had been nullified. The three most powerful leaders in the world were helpless. Their divine light, their complex magic, their ultimate destructive power, all of it was useless. This is what Kokubile was talking about, Rias whispered in horror. Standing behind Naruto. The silence. It was then that the figure finally spoke. Its voice was not a sound, but a direct, telepathic impression in their minds. It was a calm, genderless, toneless voice, like the rustling of dry leaves in a dead forest. The cacophony, the endless, pointless noise of existence. Holy, demonic, life, death, conflict, ambition, all are errors, all are corruptions of the perfect, peaceful state. Silence. Nothingness. The voice was not angry. It was not hateful. It was the voice of a zealot, a being utterly convinced of its own righteous, terrifying purpose. The Ender sees the corruption. The Ender will bring the cure. We are its heralds. We are the harbingers of peace. The Herald of Silence raised its hand again, this time towards Rias and Akeno. A wave of the same nullifying energy, invisible and absolute, washed towards them. Rias, Akeno, Searsek cried out, unable to intervene. But the wave never reached them. Naruto had moved, placing himself in front of the two women. He didn't try to block it with a fancy technique. He simply pushed back with the only power that was still working. Natural energy. His sage mode flared to life. A brilliant beacon of golden light in the rapidly graying chamber. The nullification wave hit his aura and stopped. It wasn't a hard stop, like hitting a wall. It was like a river meeting the ocean. The Herald's power was designed to unmake concepts, holiness, demonic power, magic itself. But Naruto's power wasn't a concept. It was the raw, physical, untamed energy of the planet. It was a part of reality itself. Not an idea layered on top of it. It couldn't be unmade because it simply was. The Herald's blank face tilted, focusing on Naruto for the first time. A variable, an anchor of the physical world. An anomaly. You resonate with the cacophony. You must be silenced first. The Herald dropped its hand and glided forward with an unnerving smoothness. Its movements were economical, its intentions clear. It was going to eliminate the only thing that could resist it. Naruto, be careful, Akeno cried out, her own power completely suppressed by the nullifying field. She felt helpless, a feeling she now despised. Naruto didn't respond. His entire focus was on the enemy. This was not a battle of flashy techniques. This was a battle of pure spiritual and physical will. The Herald swung its arm. And a blade of pure void, a sliver of non-existence, sliced through the air. Naruto met it with a kunai, a simple steel blade from a seal on his wrist, coated in a thick layer of sage chakra. Metal met void. The kunai screamed as the nullification energy tried to unmake it, but the potent natural energy reinforcing it held it together. The two were locked in a stalemate. A struggle between existence and non-existence played out on the edge of a simple steel blade. The leaders watched, humbled and horrified. Their cosmic powers were useless, and the defense of their woe. RLD had fallen to a human using a forgotten art and a primitive weapon. Naruto broke the lock, shoving the Herald back. He formed a Rasengan, not of wind, but of pure, condensed natural energy. It was a churning sphere of life itself. He thrust it forward. The Herald met the attack with its open palm. The Rasengan's rotational force ground against the nullification field. For a moment, neither gave way. The Rasengan couldn't be nullified, but the Herald's anti-energy was so potent it was preventing the Rasengan from making contact. The air between them crackled, space itself seeming to tear and mend around the point of conflict. Your resistance is an error, the Herald's voice echoed in their minds. The peace of silence is inevitable. It is the final, perfect state. Why do you cling to this painful, noisy illusion? Because this, painful, noisy illusion, is my home. Naruto grunted, pouring more natural energy into his attack. And these are my friends. Your peace sounds a lot like death. And I'm not going to let you lay a hand on them. With a final, defiant roar, he pushed through. The Rasengan broke past the herald's defenses and slammed into its chest. The impact was bizarre. There was no explosion of force. Instead, the herald's gray form seemed to destabilize, flickering like a bad projection. The natural energy of the Rasengan, the very essence of life, was a poison to its nature. The herald staggered back, its form wavering violently. It looked down at the point of impact, where Naruto's life-filled energy was corroding its being of nothingness. Error detected. Po. Tensei of variable exceeds projections. Report must be made. The herald's form began to dissolve, not into dust, but into the gray, lifeless static that was its essence. It raised its head, its blank face fixing on Naruto one last time. This was a greeting, a measurement. The cleansing will now begin in earnest. The Ender's gaze is upon this world. All will be silenced. With that final, chilling promise, the herald of silence dissolved completely. The oppressive cold vanished. The colors of the nebula flooded back into the chamber. The power of the three leaders returned to them in a rush. The room was silent, the only sound the heavy breathing of its occupants. Sirzex looked at his hand, summoning a small ball of his power of destruction, as if to reassure himself it still worked. Michael's wings fluttered, their light seeming brighter than before. Azazel ran a hand through his hair, a grim, thoughtful look having replaced his usual smirk. So, Azazel said, his voice heavy. That's our new enemy, a cult of cosmic nihilists who can turn off our powers like a light switch. Their goal is the end of all existence, Michael stated, his voice filled with a gravity Naruto had not heard before. This is not a war for territory or ideology. This is a war for survival. All eyes turned to Naruto. He stood panting, his sage mode fading, Rias and Akeno now at his side, their hands on his arms, supporting him. He had been the only one who could fight back. He had been their only defense. Sirzex walked over to him, his expression one of deep, profound respect. The gap between Devil King and human had vanished. Naruto Uzumaki, it seems the world owes you a debt of gratitude. Forget gratitude, Naruto said, shaking his head as he caught his breath. We have a serious problem. That thing said this was just a greeting. More of them are coming. And they have a master. The Ender. The name hung in the air, a promise of a threat on a scale they couldn't even begin to comprehend. The political maneuvering, the faction rivalries, the squabbles over bloodlines and territory, it all seemed so small, so laughably insignificant now. Rias looked at Naruto, her heart pounding with fear and pride. He was no longer just her protector or her family's anchor. He was the world's. He was the only thing that had stood between them and absolute oblivion. Her feelings for him, already deep, transcended simple love or admiration. It was a bond forged in the face of cosmic annihilation. Akeno's hand tightened on his arm. She had felt true helplessness for the first time since he had taught her to accept herself. Watching him fight their battle for them had filled her with a fierce, protective instinct. Her debt to him was now absolute. Whatever is coming, Rias said, her voice ringing with a new, unshakable resolve as she looked at Sirzex, he will not face it alone. The House of Grimoire stands with Naruto Uzumaki. Sirzex smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. I was hoping you'd say that, little sister. He looked at Naruto. The underworld will begin preparations. We will share all our findings with Heaven and the Grigori. But it is clear that you are the key. Your power is our only known countermeasure. The summit that had begun as an inquest to classify and control Naruto had ended with the leaders of the world placing their hope for survival squarely on his shoulders. He was no longer a king without a kingdom. The entire world had just become his domain to protect. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Sage's Vow. The news of what transpired at the summit SP. Read through the highest echelons of the supernatural world like a shockwave. The public story, carefully curated by the three faction leaders, was that a new, hostile group had emerged, necessitating an unprecedented alliance. But the truth, whispered in the shadowed halls of power, was far more terrifying. The great leaders had been rendered powerless, and a single human sage had been their only defense. For some, like Sirzex and the more progressive nobles, Naruto was a hero, a symbol of hope against a new, existential threat. For others, particularly the old, conservative houses of the underworld, he was the embodiment of everything they feared. The 72 pillars were built on a foundation of bloodline purity, demonic supremacy, and rigid tradition. Naruto Uzumaki shattered all three. He was a human who wielded power greater than most pure bloods. His presence had already nullified a politically crucial marriage contract for the House of Gremory. And now, he was being hailed as the world's savior, a position they felt should be held by a devil of noble birth. His influence, particularly over a Gremory heiress, was seen as a contamination, a dangerous variable that threatened to upend their entire social order. The pressure on the Gremory family became immense. Delegations from the houses of Agaras, Glacia Labelas, and other ancient families arrived at the Gremory castle, demanding that Lord and Lady Gremory sever all ties with the human anomaly. They argued that Rias's clear infatuation with him was a disgrace and that his continued presence would destabilize the underworld far more than any external threat. Lord Zeoticus Gremory, a shrewd political operator, held them off as long as he could. But the political calculus was undeniable. To appease the old guard and maintain unity in the face of the coming war with the Heralds of Silence, a formal hearing was called. The purpose, thinly veiled, was to publicly strip Naruto of his influence and formally separate him from Rias. The hearing was to be held in the Grand Hall of the Gremory Castle, a cavernous chamber with a ceiling so high it seemed to hold its own constellation of enchanted lights. The walls were lined with the portraits of generations of Gremory ancestors, their stern eyes looking down on the proceedings. A long, ornate table dominated the center of the room, with Lord and Lady Gremory at its head. On one side sat the assembled elders and representatives of the most powerful and conservative devil houses. Their faces were masks of grim disapproval. On the other side sat Rias, Akeno, and Naruto. Kuroka and the rest of the peerage had been barred, deemed unnecessary participants. Rias was dressed in formal Gremory attire, her expression a cold fury. Akeno sat beside her, her smile gone, replaced by a look of quiet, menacing stillness. Naruto, dressed in a simple black suit that Akeno and Rias had insisted he wear, looked utterly unfazed. He sat with a relaxed posture, observing he hostile elders with the same calm curiosity he had shown the faction leaders. Lord Zekram Bale, the ancient and incredibly influential patriarch of the Bale House and the de facto leader of the traditionalist faction, presided over the hearing. His face was a web of wrinkles, and his eyes, though old, were as sharp and cold as chips of obsidian. "Let us dispense with pleasantries," Zekram began, his voice a dry rasp that commanded absolute silence. "We are here to discuss a matter of grave importance to the future of the devil race. The human, Naruto Uzumaki." He fixed his gaze on Naruto, a look of utter disdain on his face. "You, a being of no lineage, no history, have inserted yourself into the affairs of the nobility. You have, through displays of a brutish and unrefined power, disrupted a sacred marriage contract and, more alarmingly, have exerted an undue influence over the heiress of the great house of Gremory." "My daughter's affairs are her own," Lord Gremory interjected, his tone firm. "With respect, Zeoticus," Zekram countered, not even glancing at him, "your daughter is a strategic asset to the entire devil race. Her bloodline is one of our most precious. To see it squandered on a human infatuation is a risk we cannot afford, especially with a new war on the horizon." He turned his cold gaze back to Naruto. "We, the elders of the 72 pillars, have reached a consensus. You will renounce all ties to Lady Rias Gremory. You will be given a handsome stipend and a remote territory to govern as a special consultant, far from the political heart of the underworld. You will continue to lend your power to our cause against the new enemy, as is your duty, but your association with the Gremory heiress ends today. This is not a negotiation." The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and absolute. It was a political execution. They were exiling him, attempting to turn him into a remote weapon they could deploy at will, while severing the very relationships that moored him to their world. Rias shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the marble floor. "Absolutely not. I will not allow this. Naruto is a hero who has saved my life and defended my honor. He has proven himself more noble than anyone in this room. I will not abandon him." Sit down, child, Zekram said, his voice laced with patronizing authority. Your emotional outburst is precisely the problem. You are compromised. This is a matter for your elders to decide. My decision is made, Rias retorted, her body trembling with rage. If he is exiled, I will go with him. I will renounce my name and my duties as heiress. Gasps echoed through the hall. For a Grimoire to renounce her name was unthinkable. It was the ultimate act of rebellion. Zekram's eyes narrowed dangerously. Do not threaten us, girl. You would throw away 1700 years of noble history for a fleeting fancy. You are a fool. It's not a fleeting fancy, a calm voice cut through the tension. All eyes turned to Naruto. He hadn't moved from his seat. He looked at Rias, a soft, appreciative smile on his face. Thank you, Rias, but this is my fight. Let me handle it. He stood up, slowly and deliberately. He did not look intimidated. He looked like a man who had finally made a decision. He walked from behind the table, stepping into the center of the hall, directly in front of Zekram Bale. The elders bristled at his audacity. His lack of deference. You talk about my influence, Naruto began, his voice not loud, but carrying to every corner of the vast hall. You talk about bloodlines and tradition. You say I'm a risk, a contamination. He shook his head, a small, humorless smile on his face. You're looking at this all wrong. You see me as a threat to your world. But the truth is, I'm the only one who didn't ask for any of this. He gestured around the hall. I didn't ask to be reborn into this world. I didn't ask for this power. I didn't ask to fight fallen angels or duel your arrogant nobles. I didn't ask to be the only one who could stand up to a cosmic horror that wants to erase all of you from existence. His gaze swept over the stunned faces of the elders. All I wanted was a quiet life. But your world kept dragging me in. And in the middle of all that chaos, I found something. I found them. He glanced back at the table. At Rias, whose eyes were wide, her anger momentarily forgotten. At Akeno, who was leaning forward, her expression one of rapt attention. And he thought of Kuroka, waiting back in the orc room. You see them as assets, he continued, his voice growing stronger. Filled with a conviction that resonated in the very stones of the hall. A Grimoire heiress, a powerful hybrid, a Nekomata sage, you see them as chess pieces, tools to secure your future. I see them as family. Rias, who offered me a place even when she feared me. Akeno, who trusts me with her darkest pain. Kuroka, who was just a desperate sister trying to protect her own. He turned his full attention back to Zekram Bale, his blue eyes burning with an intensity that made the ancient devil unconsciously lean back. You want me to renounce my ties to Rias. You want me to abandon them. Naruto laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. You misunderstand the situation completely. You think you're deciding my fate. You think you have any power over me at all. He took another step forward, his presence seeming to swell, filling the room not with oppressive power, but with an unshakable, absolute authority. Let me make this perfectly clear. I am not leaving Rias. I am not leaving Akeno. And I am not leaving Kuroka. You want to talk about the future? Fine, let's talk about the future. I will establish a new house. A new family. The Uzumaki household. A stunned silence fell over the hall. What he was suggesting was unprecedented, an act of supreme arrogance. But he wasn't finished. And the foundation of my house, Naruto declared, his voice ringing like a vow, will be them. All of them. I will take Rias Grimoire as my wife. Rias gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, her heart hammering against her ribs. I will take Akeno Himehime as my wife. Akeno's breath hitched, her usual composure shattering, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated shock and a burgeoning, brilliant joy. And I will take Kuroka Tuju as my wife. The declaration, audacious and insane, echoed in the dead silence of the hall. To take not only the Grimoire heiress, but a half-fallen and a notorious SS rank stray as his wives, all at once, it was madness. It was a political earthquake. This is not a request, Naruto stated, his gaze locking with Zekram's. This is what is going to happen. My wives will not be your political pawns. My family will not be bound by your outdated traditions. We will stand together. We will fight the coming war together, and we will build our own future together. We will be a branch of the Grimoire clan, yes, to honor Rias's family, but we will operate under my name and my rules. He had taken their ultimatum and turned it into his own declaration of independence. He hadn't just refused their terms, he had created a new reality. He wasn't just accepting Rias, he was claiming all three women. Binding them to him in the most absolute way possible, forming a power block so potent and unconventional it would shatter the political landscape. A Grimoire heiress with the power of destruction. A sage-level priestess of holy lightning. An SS-rank Nekomata sage specializing in senjutsu and spatial magic. All united under a human sage who could fight the world's new greatest enemy. It wasn't just a family. It was a superpower. You are insane. One of the elders finally sputtered, finding his voice. Polygamy is reserved for the highest-ranking nobles. And with such unsuitable partners, the council will never approve this. The council doesn't have to, a powerful, familiar voice said from the entrance of the hall. Sears X Lucifer had arrived. He walked into the hall. His crimson hair a stark contrast to his dark, formal attire. Graphia was at his side. He didn't look at the elders. He was smiling at Naruto, a look of immense pride and amusement on his face. As the acting Devil King, Sears X announced, his voice carrying the full weight of his station, I have the authority to sanction the formation of new houses and approve marital unio. NS of great political and military significance. The war against the Heralds of Silence is a threat to all of us. A union that consolidates this much power, that secures the loyalty of our single greatest asset against this enemy, is not just acceptable, it is strategically vital. He stopped beside Naruto, placing a hand on his shoulder. It was a clear, public endorsement. I, Sears X Lucifer, G.I. convey my blessing to this union and formally recognize the formation of the Uzumaki household, as a new, noble branch of the House of Grimoire. Their children will carry both the Grimoire and Uzumaki names, and will be afforded all the rights and privileges of the nobility. It was a masterstroke. Sears X had used Naruto's audacious declaration to bypass the Council of Elders completely, framing the entire thing as a wartime necessity. Zekram Bale and the other traditionalists were left sputtering, outmaneuvered and silenced by the authority of the Devil King himself. They had tried to push Naruto out, and in doing so, had given him the perfect opportunity to embed himself into the very heart of their society, but on his own terms. Naruto looked back at Rias. She was staring at him, tears of joy and disbelief streaming down her face. She had been ready to throw away her entire world for him, and in response, he had not only refused to let her, but had instead built a new world for both of them. He then looked at Akeno. The beautiful, teasing Sadoder was completely undone. Her composure was gone, replaced by a raw, vulnerable happiness so profound it made her glow. He hadn't just accepted her, he had claimed her, all of her. In front of the very society that would have scorned her, he had faced down the old guard of the underworld not with fists, but with a vow. He had won the political battle not by playing their game, but by flipping the entire table. He walked back to them, the eyes of every devil in the hall following his every move. He stopped in front of Rias and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. Is this really what you want? She whispered, her voice choked with emotion. It's the only thing I've wanted since I realized what you all mean to me, he answered. His voice soft enough for only her and Akeno to hear. I'm not much for politics or fancy titles. But I know what family is. And you guys are it. I'm not letting anyone take you away from me. Rias let out a choked sob and launched herself into his arms, burying her face in his chest. He held her tight, a feeling of rightness settling over him. Akeno stood up and, with a watery smile, wrapped her arms around both of them. Resting her head on Naruto's shoulder. You're a fool, Naruto-kun, she whispered. An absolute, wonderful fool. And I love you for it. The three of them stood there in the center of the grand hall. A tableau of defiance and devotion. They were no longer just a king and her allies, or a group of friends. They were a family, declared and sanctioned, bound by a vow that had shaken the underworld to its core. The Uzumaki household had been born. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Uzumaki household. The triple wedding of Naruto Uzumaki to Rias Grimoire, Akeno Himehime, and K. Kuroka Tuju was the single most talked about event in the underworld's recent history. It was a logistical nightmare, a political powder keg, and a source of endless, scandalous gossip. The traditionalist houses attended out of obligation, their faces sour masks of disapproval. The more progressive houses, and those aligned with Searsx, attended with genuine curiosity and excitement. Heaven sent a low-ranking angel as an observer, a quiet but significant gesture of acknowledgement. Azazel showed up personally, a bottle of centuries-old demonic liquor in hand as a wedding gift, a roguish grin on his face as he congratulated Naruto for pulling off the heist of the century. The ceremony itself was a carefully crafted blend of traditions. It incorporated the formal demonic rites of the Grimoire clan, a nod to a Shinto ceremony that Akeno had tearfully requested to honor her mother's memory, and a simple, personal vow exchange that Naruto insisted upon, stripped of all pomp and circumstance. The days leading up to it were a chaotic, blissful storm. The Grimoire estate was a whirlwind of activity, but the true heart of the new family was in the massive wing of the castle that had been designated as the Uzumaki household. It was there, away from the prying eyes of servants and political aides, that their new dynamic was forged. It was a dynamic of easy, lived-in affection. It was Naruto, waking up early to practice his katas in the garden, only to find Kuroka already there, her own senjutsu creating ripples in the morning air. They wouldn't speak, but they would move in a silent, synchronized dance of sages. A partnership of power that needed no words. Kuroka's affection wasn't teasing or regal, it was possessive and deeply physical. She would often just curl up against his side while he read, purring contentedly, her tails wrapping around his arm, a silent, constant claim of ownership that Naruto found surprisingly comforting. Her loyalty was absolute, a fierce, proactive fire directed at anyone who dared to show Naruto the slightest disrespect. It was Akeno, who had taken over the household's kitchen, declaring that only her tea was suitable for her husband. Her teasing was still present, but it was now an intimate language between them, her era, often preceding a stolen kiss or a gentle touch. She found endless amusement in watching Rias and Kuroka vie for his attention, often playing the instigator, only to swoop in and claim Naruto for herself when the other two were distracted. Her love was a blend of playful sadism and profound, healing warmth. She loved his strength, but she cherished the quiet moments where he let his own guard down, the rare times he would speak of the confusing, lonely fragments of his dreams. And it was Rias, the proud Grimoire heiress, learning to be not just a king or a political leader, but a wife. She would spend hours with him in the library, not discussing strategy, but simply sharing a comfortable silence, reading side by side. Her love was regal and proud. She reveled in showing him off, in seeing the respect and awe he commanded. But in private, she was surprisingly soft, her affection expressed in the way she would fix his tie or rest her head on his shoulder after a long day of dealing with wedding preparations and tedious politics. She was the anchor to his new life in this world, the one who had first seen him, and the one who grounded him in its reality. The wedding day arrived, a spectacle of crimson, black, and gold. Standing on the altar, Naruto looked out at the assembled crowd, then at the three women walking towards him. Rias, in a stunning crimson and white gown that screamed royalty, her expression one of pure, unadulterated happiness. Akeno, in a modified Miko-style dress of white and scarlet, a look of serene, radiant joy on her face that made her more beautiful than any angel. And Kuroka, in a sleek, elegant black kimono with a golden sash, a smug, triumphant grin on her face as if she had just won the world's greatest prize. In that moment, none of the politics mattered. The coming war, the disapproval of the elders, the weight of his new responsibilities, it all faded away. All that existed were the four of them, a strange, broken, and now beautifully complete family, ready to make their vow. The reception was a grand affair held in the main Grimoire ballroom. Music played, guests mingled, and for a few hours, a fragile peace settled over the underworld. Naruto, feeling suffocated by the endless handshakes and polite congratulations, had slipped out onto a balcony overlooking the vast Grimoire gardens. He wasn't alone for long. Hiding from your own party, darling. Kuroka's voice purred from the doorway. She slinked out, a glass of champagne in her hand, and came to stand beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. Just needed some air, he said, smiling. It's a lot. Indeed, came Akeno's voice. She joined them on his other side, her warmth a familiar comfort. I believe Lord Aguirre's face is going to be permanently stuck in a scowl. It's quite amusing. Let them scowl, Rias said, completing their quartet as she stepped onto the balcony, her arm linking with his. Today is ours. Quote. They stood there for a moment in comfortable silence, four disparate souls now bound as one, watching the enchanted lights dance in the gardens below. It was a perfect moment. A pocket of peace carved out of a universe that seemed determined to deny it to them. And then, the universe came calling. It began not with a sound, but with a feeling. A cold, creeping dread that slithered into the warm, festive air of the party. The enchanted lights in the garden flickered and died. The music inside the ballroom stuttered to a halt. A profound, unnatural silence fell over everything. Naruto's head snapped up, his sage senses screaming. Rias, Akeno, and Kuroka felt it too, their expressions hardening instantly. They're here, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. As he spoke, the very sky above the Grimoire estate began to unravel. Gray, static-filled tears in reality opened up, like wounds in the fabric of the world. From these wounds, the heralds of silence began to emerge. Not one, but dozens of them. They were identical, silent, gray-robed figures, their presence a wave of nullifying, soul-crushing cold. But this was different from the summit. These heralds were not alone. Behind them poured legions of strange, chittering creatures made of the same gray static, armed with blades of pure void. They were the foot soldiers of the Ender, an army of nothingness. Simultaneously, a series of emergency alerts flared in Naruto's mind, telepathic cries for help, patched through by Searzex's desperate command network. It wasn't just the Grimoire estate. It was a coordinated, global assault. Asgard, the heavens, the Grigori headquarters, Mount Olympus, every major supernatural bastion was under simultaneous attack. The party was over. The reception hall, filled with the most powerful nobles of the underworld, instantly transformed into a war room. The guests, moments before celebrating a wedding, now stood with grim faces as their personal guards materialized, weapons drawn. Lord Grimoire and Searzex began barking orders, organizing a defense, their faces grim. But this was a battle unlike any they had ever fought. The heralds, nullification, fields were already beginning to take effect, the ambient demonic energy of the underworld weakening, spells flickering and failing. Amidst the growing panic, one group remained perfectly calm. Naruto stood on the balcony, flanked by his three wives. He wasn't looking at the chaos below. He was looking at the sky, at the heart of the invading army. They're targeting the castle's main power source, Rias said, her strategic mind kicking in immediately. If they disable it, the defensive barriers will fall completely. Their movements are too coordinated, Akeno observed, her eyes crackling with holy lightning that, for now, still held its power. It's not a mindless swarm. They have a leader. There, Kuroka said, pointing with a clawed finger. The one that feels emptier than the others. Naruto's sage mode was already active, his golden eyes scanning the battlefield. He saw it too. One herald, standing on a floating shard of broken reality, was not fighting. It was directing the others. A silent general conducting an orchestra of annihilation. The nobles can handle the ground troops, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the rising panic with calm authority. We'll cut the head off the snake. He turned to his wives. Their wedding attire was gone, replaced in a shimmer of magic by their combat gear. Rias, in her sleek Grimoire battle dress. Akeno, in her revealing but practical Miko outfit. Kuroka, in her combat kimono. They looked at him, not with fear, but with a shared, fierce determination. This is our first fight as a family, Rias said, a ball of crimson destruction already forming in her hand. Pushing back against the encroaching nullification. Let's make it a memorable one. Akeno's three pairs of mismatched wings flared to life. I believe a bit of divine punishment is in order for crashing our wedding era. Kuroka's tail swished, her grin wide and feral. Let's show them what happens when you mess with the Uzumaki household, NYA. Naruto grinned, a fierce, bright, confident smile. He didn't need to give an order. They already knew what to do. He launched himself off the balcony, a golden comet of pure sage energy. He wasn't alone. Akeno took to the skies. A storm goddess of holy lightning, her attacks providing a brilliant, devastating cover fire. Bolts of intertwined light and demonic energy rained down, targeting not the grunts, but the herald lieutenants, disrupting their formations. Her power, a paradox of holy and unholy, seemed uniquely suited to causing feedback in their nullification fields. Kuroka didn't fly, she moved through space. She created a series of spatial portals, short-range jumps that allowed her to appear and disappear across the battlefield at will. She was an assassin, a saboteur. She would appear behind a cluster of void creatures, unleash a wave of debilitating senjutsu that attacked their strange physiology, and then vanish before they could retaliate. Her role was chaos, breaking the enemy's coordination. Rias became the artillery. She stood on the balcony, her feet planted, her power of destruction surging. She wasn't firing small blasts. She was gathering her energy, guided by Naruto's telepathic directions via his Sage mode, and unleashing massive, sweeping waves of annihilation that carved huge swaths through the enemy ranks, creating clear paths and relieving pressure on the castle's defenders. And Naruto was the spearhead. He moved through the battlefield like a phantom, his clones appearing and disappearing, creating diversions, protecting the other nobles from herald attacks, and clearing his own path. The nullification fields were strong, but his Sage mode was stronger. He was the only one who could engage the heralds in close combat and win. He punched a herald through the chest, its form dissolving. He formed a Recentrican, its piercing shriek a song of defiance against the encroaching silence, and hurled it into a dense pack of void creatures, erasing them from existence. The four of them fought as a seamless, devastatingly effective unit. It wasn't four individuals fighting. It was a single entity with four bodies. Rias's command, Akeno's air support, Kuroka's subterfuge, and Naruto's overwhelming offensive power. The Uzumaki household was a living, breathing weapon system. Naruto carved a direct path to the Herald General. The general, sensing the primary threat, turned its full attention to him, its personal nullification field intensifying to a terrifying degree. But as it focused on Naruto, it left itself open. Now, Kuroka, Naruto sent the thought. A spatial portal opened directly behind the Herald General. Kuroka shot out of it, her claws glowing with a dense, corrosive senjutsu. She raked them across the herald's back. The attack didn't destroy it, but it caused its form to flicker violently, its concentration broken for a split second. It was all the time Akeno needed. Take this, you party crasher. A massive spear of holy lightning, the most powerful she had ever summoned, descended from the heavens and impaled the Herald General, pinning it to the floating rock it stood on. The divine energy, anathema to its being, caused it to shriek, a silent, psychic scream of agony. Its nullification field wavered. Rias, Naruto yelled aloud this time. From the castle, Rias unleashed the full power she had been gathering. A colossal beam of pure power of destruction, focused to a razor's edge, shot across the sky. It was a crimson line of absolute erasure. It struck the pinned, weakened Herald General dead center. The herald didn't even have time to dissolve. It was simply gone, erased. The moment their general was obliterated, the invading army faltered. The void creatures began to dissolve, their unifying consciousness gone. The remaining heralds, leaderless and facing a unified and furious demonic nobility, began a tactical retreat, melting back into the gray tiers in reality. The battle, as suddenly as it had begun, was over. Naruto landed on the floating rock where the general had been, his Sage mode receding. Akeno and Kuroka joined him a moment later. They looked back at the castle, where Rias stood on the balcony, breathing heavily but looking triumphant. The sky above them began to mend itself, the last of the gray wounds closing. But the victory felt hollow. They had repelled the assault, but it was just one of many. The war had begun. As the adrenaline faded, a new sensation washed over the four of them. A shared, direct, telepathic vision, a parting gift from the defeated army. It was not a message. It was an experience. For a terrifying, eternal second, they felt what the herald served. They felt the ender. It wasn't a being, not in any way they could comprehend. It was a consciousness the size of a galaxy, ancient, cold, and utterly alone. It did not hate existence. It did not even notice it in a personal way. It perceived life, conflict, love, and thought as a sort of cosmic static, a painful, irritating noise corrupting the perfect, beautiful, absolute silence of its own non-state. Their war wasn't an act of malice. It was a being of unimaginable scale simply trying to turn off a sound that was annoying it. The vision ended, leaving them gasping, the psychic chill of it clinging to their souls. Naruto looked at his wives, his family. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with cosmic horror they had just witnessed. They were no longer celebrating a wedding. They were soldiers on the front line of a war for the right to exist. He reached out, and Rias, from the balcony, met his gaze. Akeno and Kuroka moved to his side, their hands finding his. A silent vow passed between them, stronger than the one they had made at the altar. They had won the battle. But the war against the silence had just begun. And the Uzumaki household would face it together. Chapter 7 End.